At it, and I'm kind of like, this is like Mad Libs. This is fantastic.
I died on the second selection. Shit.
Oh,
I got to start back over.
That happens.
I used to map out my choose your own adventure books so I could like go back to them and realize which, because I liked to figure out all of the different endings. I wouldn't do this for like every single ending, of course. I'm not psychotic, but like I would map out certain endings, mainly because, especially if I would come back to them later, I would know which ones I'd already gone through and which ones I'd want to do again. Are you familiar with Choose Your Own Adventure books?
I am.
Okay, yeah.
That's how I kind of go through the week. Anyway, welcome back, Screamers. Welcome back to another episode full of revelations and moral ambiguity. It's a special episode today, kiddos.
It is 2023, so.
We're talking Toshio Matsumoto, and I know you're all out there going, who?
You meant biblical revelations, right?
I meant, yes, and existential revelations, and is this person a ghost or not revelations? I meant all of these kind of revelations.
Sorry, I stepped on who we're speaking about today. So
you did, but that's okay. I'm used to it by now. We're talking Toshio Matsumoto. And like I said, I know everyone out there is going, who?
Insert
exactly?
the cricket sounds of the woeful cricket sounds. The
very woeful, baleful cricket sounds. Because the cricket sounds are also saying, we will tell you who Toshio Matsumoto is.
We happen to hit these like directors who only have 4 feature films that are woefully underseen and woefully not recognized in their own time. I mean, I understand. I don't understand why Elaine May is not celebrated. We've already gone through that ad nauseum, but I don't understand. Well, I say that I do understand why Matsumoto is not at the forefront of everyone's. I mean, he's a Japanese new wave filmmaker from 50 years ago, making these somewhat surrealist movies, all of them all over the place. This is very much like, it's weirdly tied into Elaine May. He doesn't really have an Ishtar, I guess.
He doesn't have an Ishtar.
But I mean, like, whereas Elaine May was kind of all over the place with her genres and and the filmmaking styles, I mean, Matsumoto was almost identical in the sense that every one of these films we're going to talk about today is different. I mean, like significantly and starkly different than the other ones. I mean, it's really, really crazy.
I think this might be our claim to fame, is that we've managed to link in like 3 minutes Elaine May and Toshio Matsumoto. I think, look, finally, kudos to us. Right? So
as if we needed any reason to pat ourselves on our own back again, or any more than we already do.
We got a podcast. Hey, let's talk ourselves up. Let's get a podcast.
2 white guys in Dallas, figure it out. They finally done it. They cracked the code.
That could be the subtitle for almost any podcast. 2 white guys in insert city here.
2 white guys figure it out.
Oh, God.
Thank God.
So we're going to talk about...
if anybody was going to do it, it was going to be us.
So we're going to talk about Matsumoto's 4 narrative films, one of which, Funeral Parade of Roses, we've touched on before, and we'll do so again here. But along with Funeral, we're going to look at Shura, or Demons, Dogura, Magura, and The War of the 16-Year-Olds. I know I said those a little bit out of order, but still.
Slightly, but it's fine.
Also, we'll no doubt talk about the directors.
No one who's listening is going to know. Unless we
that
tell
The
them.
War of the 16-Year-Olds came before Dogura, Magura.
Right.
15 years after Dogura, Magura.
Do you think, how many people do you think have seen War of the 16-Year-Olds?
Including us?
Yeah, including us.
Including the director?
Yeah, I mean,
in the cast?
Right.
So I don't know, there are a lot of extras.
It has like 77 votes on IMDb, which is not always an indicator, right?
No,
but
right.
It only has 1 critical review, which you can't get to anymore. It doesn't exist.
Right.
It has 2 user reviews. One of them, they didn't watch it with the subtitles on there. Japanese students, like,
I saw that. I saw that.
Right. And it's almost impossible to find. I mean, it's not like it's impossible because clearly I found it, but it wasn't easy to find. And so...
and Shura was really hard to find too.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I mean, and so none of these, aside from Funeral Parade of Roses, there was a DVD box set that was out.
2004.
Yeah, and
right?
it sold out almost immediately. Yeah. 3 of them were, and you can, I don't know, I couldn't find any reference to being anywhere being sold. And 3 of the movies... had English subtitles. The War of the 16-Year-Olds did not have English subtitles. So at this point, I think the way that I found the subtitles was that someone took the script, found a text version of the script, and then translated it into English. So, but I thought that the subtitles, not that this makes any difference to the people that are listening, but I thought the subtitles were actually really good on this film.
They seemed okay. I mean, I think a lot of times you can tell when something is sort of off.
The only lament, and we can get to it in when we get to that movie, but the only lament there was that I would have liked to have had the songs translated as well, the song lyrics.
Yeah.
Because I do think the song lyrics were probably speaking to something that was going on in the film that obviously I don't speak Japanese. But I think I'm going to come back to that over and over again of like, I do think that also the barrier to entry for Matsumoto is not being in the 60s and 70s in Japan and not kind of living that time frame, because it really does seem to help. I would think that it would seem to help grasp, maybe get a little bit of a deeper understanding of those films.
I think especially with War of the 16-Year-Olds. You know, Shura Demons is my movie. It's a kind of restaging or telling of the 47 Ronin story. So, you know, how much, 60s, 70s context do you need at that point? But I do think the historical context, Japanese historical context, unlocks something in all of these films. Even Funeral Parade of Roses. As much as we can sort of transplant that onto what we're looking at today, or what we're looking at in today's society.
Right.
I'll talk. Look, I'll get there.
It's
right?
early.
It's okay. It's
early in the podcast.
It's 4 PM. It's still early.
This is like the calisthenics area of
God, right? No kidding.
of our podcast.
But so yeah, I mean, maybe not, because all of his films are set in different. Well, I shouldn't say that. War of the 16-Year-Olds is set in the present day that it was shot, and so is Funeral Parade of Roses. But the other two are more historical, right? Dogura, Magura, and Shura are more historical pieces. But again, like all of sort of Japanese history plays into these films. And so the more that I looked into that, and when I say more, I mean like briefly, right? The movies did sort of make a different kind of sense, or I think something else was unlocked there.
Right.
So I want to go back and say that we will sort of talk, I think, at least by some extension, about his short films and his video art installations as well, right? So Matsumoto started from a place really of documentary filmmaking, and he became a pioneer of Japanese 60s experimental filmmaking. He developed what he coined neo-documentaryism, an expressive type of documentary rejecting its traditional objective nature for one that would reveal internal states and subjectivities. And his films, in one way or another, seem to confront the contradictions of culture and political systems of post-war Japanese society, going back to what you said.
Right.
Did you watch his first 2 documentaries?
I did not.
They're just poetry. They're
really?
just pure poetry. I mean, they're exactly what he's talking about there in this neo-documentaryism thing. I mean, they are looking at specific places and specific people where you would expect this sort of objective kind of, wide view of these kimono makers, right? In Kyushu, I think, what you get is close-ups and kind of haunting voiceovers. It's really interesting. I mean, they're really interesting kind of pieces that do all the things that you don't expect a documentary to do well before its time, well ahead of its time.
In the sense, I think of documentarianism, and I think of Errol Morris, who kind of does it probably the best as far as pulling himself, not making him part of the documentary, making kind of look like you're looking in kind of an eye in the life, or a day in the life. You're looking kind of at at these people's lives.
Right.
Is that kind of how it works out, or is it?
It's so much more abstract, and I don't really want to say surreal, because surreal is more like what we see in Dogura Magura, right?
Right.
But this is, you just see sort of a kimono worker's hand, right? And then you get this voiceover telling sort of about kimonos, why they're important, right? How fashion has changed, right? So you get these kind of like visual metaphors rather than any kind of like fly on the wall or pull back like objectivity. You don't get sort of a head in a box talking, right?
Right.
You get a close up of an eye. I mean, that kind of
right,
work,
sure.
right? So you are right there in there, and he's trying to use scenery, trying to use technique to get at emotions, to get at feelings, to get at alienation, to get at cultural differences, tradition versus kind of progress, right? These ideas. So it's not objective at
Sure.
all,
Right,
but
right.
but it's
But none of them really
playing
are
in
anyway.
that right. But it's also saying like I'm not being objective. I mean, so
Right. I'm trying to make up your mind for you. Which is,
they remind me. Have you seen
typical.
like Chris Marker's stuff?
I don't think so.
Sansolil.
Oh, I'm familiar.
La
but
Jetty.
Yes. Okay.
They
yes.
remind me of
Right.
those.
Okay.
In sort of how they're much more concerned with artistic sensibility
Right.
than let me tell you about what these people do every day. You know what I mean?
So, in the day of the life of a kimono maker.
Yeah, yes. Today, the kimono maker will make a kimono. I just got sparks like come on over my house. Like, but anyway, those first two short documentaries are really nothing short of a kind of poetry. I really like how he appropriates television and journalistic forms in order to reveal like the actual manipulation behind them, and I think we see this to great effect in Funeral Parade of Roses, right? How he brings in a film crew to show us the making of this film, but we're also making a kind of behind the scenes documentary about the lives of these people. And it's like, look, this is how we manipulate, this kind of scene, these kind of moments,
right?
These kind of films.
Funeral. Do we want to go back and kind of give overviews of, like, 'cause I don't think we really, when we talked about this in our Christmas episode, like our gift episode, we really didn't dive deep into plot of Funeral Parade of Roses, because we just kind of like talked about,
it's Oedipus Rex. It's not, but
right. But I mean, the storyline of Eddie being this, gay boy, he works as a drag queen, a transvestite in the club. He is kind of like he's the headliner, but he is, he doesn't run the club, and he's sleeping with the club's owner. The club's owner also is sleeping with the grand madam that runs the club and kind of keeps all of the gay boys in line. This is, of course, and these are the terms that are used in the movie. So this is not our term. This is terms that came over during the occupation in Japan. So gay boy wasn't a thing that was being said in Japan before that. But anyway, so you get the idea that this is not something that I'm just making up and throwing out there.
They're self-identifying as that in the film itself too.
And so also the owner of the club is involved in a underground drug trade that is being used to, it's seemingly, let me ask you this. Did you get the idea that the drug trade, in addition to keeping the owner in money, was also fueling or the kind of the Che Guevara underground movement that was happening in Japan? Or did you think that Eddie was just kind of keeping a toe in both in both arenas, kind of keeping into his youth and kind of getting into that abstract counterculture while also being a part of the counterculture that was more mainstream accepted in Japan at the time? Yeah,
I think Eddie's working. I think Eddie is sort of,
I guess Eddie's selling to that counterculture, right? He's the kind of link between.
Well, it seems like Eddie is sort of the link in the club of the drugs. And so, and also, because it seems to me like in probably all of the workers in the club are probably dealing for the owner anyway. That is probably just a side kind of hustle within the club. And so then, they're probably also supplying their friends, right? Because Eddie later with the Che Guevara crew, she isn't selling to anybody. She brought it.
She just gives it basically.
Yeah, right. So, they just all partake. So I think that she is, while she's in both worlds, I think she would be anyway. I think that she is sort of hip and young, right? And this is where I work, and this is how I am at work. And I have friends, but we do this other stuff outside of work as well, right? We can call Eddie a creative type, right? That kind of work is creative. She has to entertain. She has to, get people to partake, get people to buy in, right? So she's a kind of actress. Right. And so,
so she works in this, I guess, somewhat underground gay club where straight-laced businessmen will come to unwind and be doted upon by these gay boys that are dressed as women. It's very difficult to understand how they identify. And of course, it's 1969. It's not like this was a nomenclature that was present at the time anyway. All the while, so that's the story we're given at the beginning. There's a competition between Madam and Eddie because there's a jealousy there of the older woman who's is aging out of the eye of the owner of the club
and the patrons.
Right, true. And yeah, she's more of a older school geisha, whereas Eddie is this like
new geisha
mod. Yeah, right. He's she dresses in this modern clothing for the time. Very
her outfits are fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing.
Oh my god.
One of the things I would have liked to have seen behind the scenes of this, because this movie's in black and white, stark black and white, and there's reasons for that, mostly because of the gore and the violence that happens. It tones it down, but also provides a really very stark contrast for the visuals. But I would have loved to have seen the color stills from this movie just to see kind of how all of that looked, because it really does do a great job of capturing the look. And Truffaut and Godard did the same thing, where they would capture these great visuals of Paris or wherever they were filming in Italy. And just there would be and Matsumoto does the same thing with Japan, putting us into kind of like modern day Tokyo, 1969 modern day Tokyo, and getting us a real kind of slice of life of that as well. And then the movie, it's interesting to me, the film kind of plays around with the timelines, right? I mean, like, so if you just look at it from a straight plot thread, we bounce back and forth. We go very quickly into the very opening scene. We see. Well, the opening scene is a very loving shot of Eddie showering. And it's kind of a twist on the trope of the male gaze, and you're watching this gay boy, in the shower, and it's basically filmed as if you would film kind of a film where if this was a female. And done in the same way. You get water rushing down the body, you get an extended nipple shot, you get a butt shot. It's just a whole thing, right? And Eddie is a gorgeous human being. Right? So she's very alluring to. I mean, like they capture the screen the entire time, anytime that they're on it, right? But we bounce back and forth. The first thing we see is Eddie and the owner of the club. They're driving away, and it's very clear that they're coming out of his apartment. And Madam is there, and she sees them. This sets up a whole plot line of her trying to get revenge on Eddie and her trying to set her up with in a fight. And then the Oedipus Rex piece of it, where we find out that throughout, we kind of bounce back and forth. We find out that Eddie had been potentially abused as a young boy. He also was trying to basically be his mother's only male influence in her life, or only male in her life. And when that was rejected by her, and almost cruelly rejected by her, he stabs one of her lovers and kills her. And then we find out that the owner of the club, the Eddie's father, because of the molestation, potentially, we don't ever really get it fully explained, has left Eddie's life. Eddie has forgotten what he looks like. He only has a picture that has a cigarette hole over his face. It turns out, of course, that the owner of the club is actually Eddie's father. They find out that through he has the picture in his room. Eddie's father then cuts his own throat, and then Eddie gouges out his eyes and then walks out into kind of the public square, and everyone's kind of looking at him and kind of gazing. That's almost like an afterthought to this movie in a sense, where it's just really. I mean, I get the idea, but when there's a couple things that annoy me about when I was reading about this is a take on Oedipus Rex. Yes, it is. It is a gender bending take on Oedipus Rex, but really a small portion of that. And then we talk about the reason that this should be recognized is because it was an influence on Clockwork Orange. When I was like, "Fuck you,
right.
You should recognize this because this is a great film.
Because it's brilliant."
I'm not going to push away Kubrick and Clockwork Orange. I love that film, but I mean that's not why you should watch Funeral Parade of Roses. And I
because it stands on its own two legs,
right? And I would almost hesitate that its influences are slight in them. I mean, like I can understand a great filmmaker like Kubrick looking at this and thinking this is this great film and taking pieces from it when he makes his own. But this is not something that directly influenced. This is bits and pieces. This is not a precursor to Clockwork Orange,
right?
So,
right. I think the interesting thing about the Oedipus, or the use of Oedipus Rex, is that Matsumoto uses it as a kind of skeleton or scaffolding. it's almost a way for him to get there, to get to this story, right?
Right,
He's like, what if we did a sort of gender bending take on Oedipus Rex? Like, what would that look like? And then it was almost like, okay, forget about that, right? But it almost is like a way in, as a way, a creative way or an imaginative way into this story, right? Rather than, okay, we're going to retell Oedipus Rex. It's like, let's just imagine that these things happen in a similar way and then go from there.
It's almost like that's how he sold it, like you said, like he sold it to the studios, right? And that's how he got the money to make it, because then he's way more interested in the filmmaking techniques. He's way more interested in kind of subverting tropes. He's way more interested in kind of putting the question back onto us about, who we are in this world. Yeah. And so there's a whole through line of people wearing masks, and we're always wearing masks regardless of what situation we're in, and that masks may be different from one person to the next, and they may be different from one situation to the next on the same person, and that we may not ever really truly know ourselves. And so that's a thread that exists in the film. So I mean, and then he does, like you said, there's a film within a film within a film here. And part of it is that we the audience are also a part of this storytelling process at certain times, specifically in times where I guess the audience is made to feel, I don't know if it's uncomfortable he pulls back specifically in the first time he pulls back and shows us the documentary style, or shows us we are watching a film being made, is during the sex scene with Eddie, when Eddie's basically picked up a guy off the street. And
it's a regular customer in the club.
Right. Sure.
Tony.
Right.
And who's like an American GI.
Right.
And who's also involved with sort of like running drugs. And so there's a connection there too. But yeah.
But it's this really like the scene is funny because you're focused on Eddie, and it's like the normal it's like the normal sounds of lovemaking.
But I think you're right to say that, as funny as it sounds, you saying that, because Matsumoto is saying these are the normal sounds of lovemaking. It doesn't matter if it's two men or if it's a quote unquote gay boy and another man. This is normal. He's framing it and shooting. He's doing all of this as if we're watching a heterosexual film, right? By, how do you pronounce the Doom Generations director?
Aoki or Greg
Araki?
Araki.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we're watching a heterosexual, right, or homosexual film by Greg Araki. I mean, but that kind of like, I'm just going to show you this. This is how this is. Like, this is normal. This is. I'm not going to fetishize this. I'm not going to make it funny or clownish, right? And then what I'm going to show you is the behind the scenes, because I'm manipulating all of you.
Right. So when we pull back and we see we see the director, we see the camera, we see the boom mic and all of it, and there's 100 different people in the room, and it's an exaggeration, but there's many people in the room.
There's a film crew in the room.
All around the bed. And basically Eddie is writhing on the bed by herself, and Tony's over in the corner shirtless, just kind of
just hanging out
because he's not part of this love scene, really.
Right.
So, the way that it's framed. And then it's so like, I don't know. I love I love that scene so much, just because of the way Eddie interacts with the crew after it's being done. Because first off, the first thing that they say is, okay, are you okay? They're very like, it's very...
They're very progressive.
Right, yeah, for that time of like, okay, are you okay with this scene? Do you still feel, emotionally safe?
There was an emotional coordinator on the...
Right, in 1969 Japan. I mean, that's awesome.
Way ahead of where we are.
And Eddie's like, yeah, I'm great. And they give her a shirt, and she's like playfully putting it back on. I don't know, that scene just plays so well. And then we cut directly into the director asking these actors about, and they're, I guess, well, he's asking Eddie, but then he also gets to the other actors about them being gay boys, and with the assumption, I guess, that they are gay boys and that he's pulled them off the street.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's everything that I've read or seen reported is that they weren't actors, right? They were people in this. I feel like lifestyle is the wrong nomenclature, but they were people in this underrepresented community. Is that better?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, no, I mean, right. and I don't mean to be like,
I don't be, right?
Well, that's exactly. I'm trying to be respectful, because I don't want to say lifestyle, because it's not,
right.
That makes it sound like it's something you can just sort of take on and take off. And I don't want to imply that. I think it's important that we don't imply that this is just, oh, maybe tomorrow I'll change my mind, right?
Right.
Because and that's one of the questions that gets asked of these individuals, why and will you always be this way? And then most of them go, yeah, why wouldn't I?
Right.
I mean, this kind of look of confusion, like,
Well, and the one
weird
question
question.
that really stood out to me, or the one answer that really stood out to me, was they're asking, do all gay boys like girls, or do all gay boys? And the person who's answering is like, oh, I can't answer that for everyone.
right.
Like, I don't know.
Right.
I can answer it for me, but I can't answer it for everyone. And I think that we brought up in a discussion afterwards, and I didn't bring it up, but it was brought up in a discussion afterwards about potentially what Matsumoto and what his viewpoint was on these people and this lifestyle, however we want to characterize it, because we talk about masks and the potential of saying that it is something that we're putting on, this affectation that we put on to display to someone else. And I never really got, because he's asking these questions. I think the idea is that, and I think maybe the idea that Matsumoto was trying to get across was that regardless of who we are, what we do, that there's always something, right? I mean, and it's not a mask necessarily that you could take off or you put on, but we all play different roles in our different portions of our lives. I mean, so this idea that I never saw it as a degrading or demeaning or a belittling thing to say that
These people aren't sideshows to him.
Right. And you never get that feeling. In fact, you never. I mean, she's the hero of this story. Eddie is the hero of this story. The one that he's Oedipus, right? She's Oedipus. The one that you're supposed to feel heartbroken for,
Mm-hmm.
and to watch them kind of navigate this, this story and how it all plays out is, I don't know. I thought it's really, really beautiful.
It's amazing. I think the mask thing is more of an indictment of us as the viewer,
Right.
Where Matsumoto's maybe saying, this is who Eddie is. Eddie's brave enough to take off this one mask that society really wants her to wear and not wear it. Sure, maybe she's wearing different masks when she's in the club or with her friends or, at this shopping center or in this art gallery. But again, we all do that, right? Are we brave enough, though, to take off that one mask that everyone wants us to put on, right? And for Eddie, it's you need to be a normal heterosexual sort of identifying male. And Eddie's like, nope, not going to do that.
Right.
And so you could, look, I think a cynical, different view of that would be, well, no, actually she's putting on this other mask because that's not how we were supposed to identify. But I think that is the, frankly, wrong interpretation.
Well, and you see that Eddie is consistent throughout the entire film, whereas you see someone like Guevara, who, for comedic effect, he sneezes and his beard and his socialist beard comes off, right?
Right.
And it's so that you look at this as someone,
I do also want to. I'm sorry. I just want to go back to the Che Guevara. Che Guevara was dead before Cuba exiled and deported gay men. I just want to.
That was brought up in the.
I just want to point that out. I just want to point that out. He died before all of that happened. That was Castro, and you can say what you want about Castro. But yeah, Guevara pretending to be this revolutionary, or at least pretending to look like, right, embody this thing, and I don't know if that is another indictment on certain types. I don't think it's an indictment on socialists. He was part of the Japanese Marxist party at that time, too. Matsumoto was. So
I never read too much about his portrayal in that, other than just the youth being a counterculture and glomming. It would be just like we buying the shirts that are that have Guevara on them now. It's as senseless as that.
My beard comes off at night. Look, we've come a long way in spirit gum.
And honestly, like, Eddie at no point is ever untrue to themselves. Like, when Guevara is playing his ludicrous 60s avant-garde art film that he's put together, where he's filming a wavy television, and they've all watched it. Eddie's the first one to chime up, and the gay boys are like,
I don't get it.
Sorry, the gay boys are like, yeah, I don't get it. it was, my head hurts. It's fun. They never claim to be anything other than what they are, and they never, succumb to the pressures of trying to be like where everyone else in that circle really does until they start doing drugs together, and then it's all kind of a free for all.
But again, like that's that commentary of who are the real posers here, right?
Right.
Who are the real ones that are putting on these masks to appease and please others around them? And it's not Eddie and her cohort.
Do you ever get the feeling that like Matsumoto, like every film was just like mic drop, just like fuck, I just did this shit just better than anybody ever fucking else did.
Kind of. I mean, this guy. Look, I sent you a text earlier and said I don't think I can do this guy justice, and I know that I'm not going to be able to.
Right. We're not smart enough. I mean, I know I'm not.
Speak for yourself, Wiseman.
Well, I mean, like we just don't have the situational knowledge either to really kind of do him justice, and we also. Having watched all of his films in a time span of a week and
less than a week,
right?
Yeah, less than a week.
We're not going to come up with a detailed like we said before in the Christmas episode. This is a person whose classes should be taught. We should have classes about Matsumoto. We should have, like I said, a Criterion box set. We should have a deep dive. And now it's almost to the point where it's too late. Obviously, he's not here anymore. And I don't know. I'm assuming. I have no idea what his life was like. But I mean, like this.
There's not a lot of information.
Right.
On it,
And so that's crazy to me that, I understand that these films are not easy to watch. They're not lighthearted. They're in Japanese. You're going to have to pay attention. And the films that we're going to get to in the next 3, you certainly have to pay attention because if you don't, you're going to be completely fucking lost. This one is a lot of whimsy. You're going to be lost in this movie. Because it helps to see it over and over again. Mainly the time jumps, I think, really kind of mess with you on the first viewing. Just because it's it's kind of jarring because you go from one scene and then it never really helps you out. It just you goes I'm seeing that scene again. What the fuck's going on?
But I do think that if you have seen, and look, I think if you're seeking this film out, you probably have seen stuff by Godard and by other filmmakers like that. Then I think you almost immediately understand. You're like, okay, I know this kind of format or storytelling technique. I've seen this before. Okay, I kind of have an idea.
In a sense, though, but you've never seen the camera pull back for the fourth wall.
Right? No, correct. Right. I just mean that I because I don't want like people to go. I don't know. I don't think it's as. I think it's shocking and jarring, but I don't think it's. Maybe this is where we're getting to like our intelligence levels. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. If you like non-linear narrative structures, then I think you're totally into this. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I mean,
sure.
I don't know. I don't scare people away.
No.
It's not that hard.
If anything comes to this podcast, I hope that people seek out these films. And I mean, I know that they're going to be difficult to find. But Funeral Parade of Roses is easier now than it ever has been. And hopefully it will start getting repertory screenings and people will come around to it. And I don't know. I don't know if it will or not. But this is one that because of its, and we haven't really even talked about this, but like in 1969, in this progressive, this is a wildly progressive movie for 1960. This is a wildly progressive movie for 2023.
Yeah.
Considering what we're going through today.
Yeah.
And so to have these attitudes and have a filmmaker be so open and have a filmmaker have, a trans or a drag queen or however, again, the nomenclature doesn't really exist or it doesn't really define in the movie. But to have Eddie as a protagonist in 1969 in Japan, or even in the U.S. or anywhere, it is a wonderful and beautiful film. It is challenging, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should stay away from it.
I'm sorry. I just sound like I'm like it's not that difficult. Stop it. Like it's not. No, it's challenging, sure, but like I think we have talked a lot on this podcast about films that you have to just kind of go with, right? You can't fight against them,
right?
I mean, and this is another one of those where you just have to sit back and go, okay, I might be a little lost, but man, this is fucking cool.
Right. And we haven't even talked about the cut scenes or the sped up fight scenes or There's a whole sequence where Madam and Eddie get into a fight, and they get into like a Western standoff. They shoot guns at each other, and then there's just word bubbles that come up where they're calling each other names. And then once Eddie calls her a "see you next Tuesday," Madam slaps her, and then there's a huge fight. There's a fight out on the street that's really, I mean, there's gay boys in a male urinal peeing standing up. That's a wonderful shot. That's like probably like the most famous shot of the movie. And then, the transformation, man, I could go on and on and on. There's all these different pieces, and it's hard to like put together a real like narrative thread to talk about this movie, right? Because it doesn't go from point A to point B. But when Eddie becomes the madam of the club, and that's on the one of the original posters and one of the original like VHS and DVDs, is Eddie's like made up face. It's so like wonderful and so like again modern, from what Madam had been, it's this kind of stoic looking geisha. The one thing that I lament, and one thing you can't really, I guess this is what maybe the wrong term, I didn't really find a whole ton about, was homosexuality in Japan at this time.
Right.
And whether or not this was, I'm assuming that these clubs weren't something that Matsumoto made up, that this was a thing. Because, I mean, historically, feudal Japan had a, where men of prominence could, be in relationships with younger men and boys who were beneath their stature. And so this is similar. It's just different. These I don't know what ages Eddie and all of them are. And I don't want to get into that type of, conversation.
Right,
but I mean, these are young men that are, these are young gay boys who are with what would be seen as straight Japanese men of businessmen, right? I mean, and it seems like that, if not prominently exposed, that these clubs were kind of a given and just accepted. Mm-hmm. And Eddie and her crew walk around the city dressed in female clothing and gender specific female clothing, and aren't really accosted. They're not really, there's no showing of them like outward hatred, aside from when the gang of women that is sent to fight them.
Right. I mean, they're paid to go do that. Yeah.
That's the only time that there's a confrontation. It would be really interesting to have a kind of a companion piece to talk about this era. And what's also interesting about Japan homosexuality at this time is you don't hear anything about female homosexuality. It's only about the male portions of it, if you can find anything at all. So, I mean, it's one thing I would imagine that there probably wasn't written a whole hell of a lot about, because they probably didn't want to write about it. They didn't really want to talk about it. Yeah. But it's an interesting, point in time to say, well, this is progressive for Japan, but really, what was it like? How prevalent were these clubs? And was this something that kind of out of the norm, or is it now? I don't even know.
Right. Yeah. And those norms continue to change.
Sure.
As well.
Swing,
and
right.
Yeah, I mean, because Stonewall was 69.
Right.
I mean, so even in the United States of America, right? I mean, this stuff is not prevalent, or it's underground, or it's kind of like they're speakeasies.
Sure.
But I do think the relationship of prominent male with younger, lower statute or sort of pupil has been a relationship that's gone back to ancient Greece.
Sure.
Right? I mean that's a very common thing. I will take you sort of under my wing or protection, and this is what it is. But I mean, look, I mean the definitions and sort of acceptances of sexual acts again changes over time and becomes normalized or denormalized, right, for lack of a better term. So.
One of the, not to shift completely focus, but one of the fun things at the screening was the eyeball gouge, or the knife of the eyeball, and seeing how that gets everybody every single time. You haven't seen it for the first time. It's jarring.
Right? It is. That's so good, though.
Yeah. He does a really good job with the gore effects in this movie. He does a really, really good job.
Yeah.
And that'll show in Demons as well, for sure.
It's just a fantastic do you remember when Funeral Parade of Roses was screened at Film at Lincoln Center? Was it 2014?
I want to say 17 when they did the re-release. Because there was a 4K restoration And I specifically remember it being released here in Dallas the same weekend that Bad Batch was released. And so,
so
it would have been 2017.
Yeah. Because Shura was screened there in 2019.
Wow.
Which was interesting. All right. So yeah, let's move on to Demons.
Yes.
We'll talk about Shura. This is 1971, so this is his follow-up. I guess if we'll call it that. This is a kind of subversive samurai story. It's a take on the 47 Ronin story. So here's the synopsis. Gingobi Satsuma, an exiled samurai cast out as an Asano clan retainer, is given a second chance to join his brothers in arms to become the 48th Ronin against the shogunate. His servant gathers the 100 yo required, but Gingobi is also in love with a greedy geisha named Komen. She's about to be sold to another man. Gingobi learns that for him to keep her debt is exactly what he has. But this is also a scam. And then all hell breaks loose. This is a kind of like Buddhist hell, right? That depicts Gingobi's fall into becoming, right, or being caught in this never-ending cycle of violence, jealousy, war, bloodshed. Shura refers to the Asura, the Buddhist demigod of war. It also refers to a path of carnage and destruction brought on by forsaking one's humanity, or I think in this case, honor, right, for our samurai. I believe that Shura is also sometimes used to describe a person who falls into a situation where they have to fight an endless war against something in a kind of restless, inhumane manner. There are so many chances for all the bad shit in this film not to happen.
Yes, this is I'm going to pull my arms out of this tar with my face movie 100%. Also, I was going to say, I was driving in to do this, I was like, holy shit, Brock's at the lion's share of the work. You're trying to, one, use all the Japanese language, and then two, explain all the plots of these fucking movies. So.
That's probably...
and this is the most straightforward one you've got.
Do you think so?
I mean, maybe
I think War of the
I don't know. The War of the 16-year-olds
feels a little more straightforward to me in narrative terms.
Yeah, but there's a lot going on there.
Oh my God, there's so much going on there. I think I wrote that down. But that also has like I think one of the shortest synopses. So I don't know. Yeah. Look, these first two films remind me a lot of the work of the photographer Daido Moriyama. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He was a really famous Japanese photographer. I know most of his street photography work, but I mean, similar kind of composition, contrast styles. So especially these first two films. And they would have been near contemporaries. And Matsumoto, in fact, they were both included in an exhibition in 2015 at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, a kind of like a Japanese experimental photography exhibition. So they would have been probably in the same sort, probably knew each other. I don't know. They're probably best friends. right.
They did a buddy cop movie together in 1972.
I think they did, yeah. Beat Takashi was in it.
Because he's in everything.
Because he's in everything, yes, I know. In fact, he directed.
Right.
And, yeah, I don't know. So something in this film that I really love is that we start out in color.
Yeah, it's so
we
good.
get this this like burning red blood like sunset, and then there is no more color. It is black and white, and it is like the world that this film is set in. The sun just refuses to touch.
Right. It's almost 100% in night. Right. I mean, it's like, and even if it's not, even if we happen to dip into daytime, we wouldn't know it.
Nope.
Like, this is a stage play. I mean, this looks like...
Well, it's based off a stage play.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. It's based off a stage play that's based on the legend or the story of the 47 Ronin.
Like, this would be brilliant, especially if you could do, like, Pleasantville type, like, makeup while you were doing it to keep it black and white. But to stage this in black and white on a really kind of, like an intimate... theater, they would be so
like in a
amazing.
black box kind of thing. Oh,
yeah. It was so good.
It is, but it's so gorgeous. It's so lush too. The blacks. I would have loved to have seen this, instead of on YouTube, right? In the theater or in like a really high quality Blu-ray transfer? Because
Yeah.
I mean, I bet the blacks are just. I mean, they look great anyway, but man, I can't imagine.
And like Matsumoto does, like he knows when to make an image stark, right? Because it's not the entirety of it where it's just 100% Frank Miller black and white, right?
No,
It's
right.
But I mean, like it's so. But there are moments where he wants you to focus. Like this is as closest I think we get to a Matsumoto horror film, right? I mean, this is. There are moments where you're focused on Genobe's face, and it's just like it's just so frightening and scary, and like he's so intense. And then there's moments when he's in silhouette, or and you're. The way that he frames and the composition of all of his shots, like this is why I think it would make a great stage play, is just to see like to be able to like kind of take it all in. Because the film, you tend to focus on the main point of focus, right? But there's so much going on, like May in the background. There's so much going on with it, and there's not that many characters in this, right? But the way that his protege / husband, of the kimono. What's her name? I forget now. What's the
Komon?
Yeah, Komon. Her husband, when he like comes to him and is like, "Hey, I need you to come," and he's like just hanging out, like lazily, like laying in the background smoking. So the movie opens up with Genobe basically dreaming of all the things that are going to happen to
and
him.
He's running,
right?
And I think this is a great shot too, where he's running back to his house and he's being chased, but we don't see people chasing him. We see their lanterns,
right? Yes,
and you kind of see their silhouettes, but just barely. It's so that's a real affecting part of the black and the white contrast.
Yeah,
there. Sorry.
No. And so so the whole idea is that he is this rundown samurai, right? And he is begging for money. He has a servant who makes umbrellas to kind of help, but he's also, we meet him and he's sold everything in his house. He's in an empty home, which a lot of paper windows that get poked through and get slashed and knocked over walls. And
so I want to talk about this for a second. I'm sorry. I want to stop you because this is interesting because we see him and he is run down and he's begging on the street and he's sold everything. And his servant's like, what the fuck is going on? And Gengobe kind of looks at him and goes, I know what I'm doing. And his servant goes, are you tricking everyone? And he's like, yeah, I am. So that was a real thing with those 47 Ronin, right, who were plotting their revenge on their master's killer. There's, I guess, the sort of head guy, Oshi. There are stories about him passed out drunk in the ditch and people walking by and spitting on him, right? But the whole time he was doing it so that these spies would go back and tell this guy, look, he's washed up. Don't fucking worry about it, right? He's not going to do anything. And I thought that was a really nice kind of play here too. So, yeah.
And then and
again, historical context, right? I mean, it's
absolutely.
Like that,
it helps. It definitely helps. And this movie plays with time as well. There's a scene at the very beginning where Genobe like looks back like 6 different times. I don't know how many. I just forgot. I lost count. But he looks back over and over and over again. So he's down on his luck. His manservant has scraped up enough money for him to get back into the Ronin, essentially, right?
And he raised some money, and other people like chipped in, and then all this stuff. Yeah.
And so, and this movie's so delicious. Like I just love how it all plays out.
I know.
So
I know. It's just
twist upon twist upon twist. But he's in love with this geisha. He's trying to, and so she has debts, and that's exactly the amount of money that he has to pay to get back into the Ronin. And so she goes off to basically confront and the people who she owes. And the manservant's like, here's the money to get back into the Ronin. You need to go do that and let her do her thing. And then once this is all taken care of, you can come back and marry her. But his protege, when I guess, is he also a Ronin? I couldn't really figure out what their relationship was other than kind of like.
He was some kind of servant. Kind of right. But it didn't seem like a very faithful one or a very good one.
Right.
Or, I mean, for that matter. So I don't know if he was just kind of like there and doing work. But I don't think he was a Ronin. I don't think he was.
So he comes to give Genobe a letter from Komen, and basically they need to go rescue her or get her from her debtors because she's about to be sold off to another Ronin.
A fancy samurai,
right?
To like a fancy samurai, yeah.
And so we go back and we're privy to this scene about how these four men are sitting around, basically bad mouthing Ganobe. And they're also, saying, well, he'll never get this money together. He can't scrape together 2 pennies, essentially. Mm-hmm. And Ganobe has this vision of himself going in and scaring all these men and becoming very, basically showing him that, hey, I'm still the samurai you thought I was, and you can't speak to me like that. I'm going to throw down this money. And then as soon as he throws down the money, the angel on his shoulder comes in. Basically his manservant comes into his mind and says, hey, what are you doing? I got all that money. That was supposed to be for your retribution, not hers. And so he has second thoughts. And then his we'll call him as a disciple, his protege, basically convinces him to go back in.
You're gonna let them say that?
You can't let him talk about you like that. So he goes in, and now, but he can't muster the bravado, right? Wasn't a real thing. He is able to buy Komen back and pay off her debts, and
because she is going to kill herself,
right?
And
right.
so because he tries to walk away several times. He's just like, sorry, like you know what, like you did this, you figure it out. I gotta go, right? She's like, I'll kill myself, and she grabs like one of his swords and he gets it back and he's walking out, and she takes her hairpin that she had earlier said I was going to stick in my ear for some reason, I forget why, and she like gets ready to jab it into her neck, and he stops her. And that's so this idea that she's going to kill herself because of this, he almost like takes pity and then pays for her release.
And so it turns out
twist
that she was never under any debtor control.
Right.
That his protege is married to Komen. They have a child together. Mm-hmm. And that he needed that money to get back into the good graces of his father. Mm-hmm. And so they take that money and go back to his father. Well, in the meantime, Kenobe comes back and murders everybody who's involved, like just fucking lays waste.
Just like, oh.
And so we follow the protege and Komen back to the father's house, and we find out that the father is trying to raise the exact same amount of money that he needed, that the son owed him, because he wants to get a Ronin back into the good graces. A different named Ronin, but a Ronin that
because he's living under basically a pseudonym, right? Yeah.
Right. Turns out, flash forward, it's Kenobe. Right?
Yeah,
it's Kenobe.
It's the same guy. It's the same guy. So here we are. We're already like, this shit did not need to happen.
All we needed to
none of this needed to happen.
Wait, you needed?
Wait, yeah, but we could have. So we just had to. Oh.
Are you familiar with the stand-up comedian Brian Regan? He's like a family-friendly. He's pretty.
Oh, as soon as you said family-friendly, no, I don't do family-friendly anything.
He's really, really funny, but he has this bit about how he was going down the road and he saw 2 log trucks passing each other. He's like, "Wait a minute, like you had logs? You said you needed logs,
but I don't."
Anyway,
well, and that's just a metaphor for the way that we distribute food around the world, right?
Right.
Or oil. Wait, we're buying. Wait, we could. Sorry.
So basically, Ganobe finds. So flash forward, Ganobe is on the run from the cops because the cops know that he murdered 5 people or 4 people or whatever it was that he killed those people. So now they've been chasing him down, and he's going to exact revenge from his disciple and Komen. He finds out that they're married and they have a kid, he confronts Komen, and the baby is crying. And one of the most brutal fucking scene, and like a scene that today, oh no, there's no way they're gonna do that thing,
right?
And so
this is what they do.
In order to punish Komen, Ganobe sticks his samurai sword through the baby to make it stop crying. And then she freaks out, of course, and is like, how could you do that? How could you kill my innocent child? And of course, she ends up getting killed. And then and then the son finally figures out that the money that he gave his father was meant for Ganobe the entire time. And just a huge comedy of errors, just because. And I think it's just a metaphor about how we don't communicate with one another these days.
Yeah, it is, but it's also, this idea about, I don't know. I think a lot of his films, especially in this one, maybe War of the 16-year-olds, but I think Dogura and Magura too. Is like, who do we blame for things, right? Who do we hold accountable and why for some of these, for some of our foibles or misgivings or errors, right? Is it our fault? Is it someone else's? How do we decide, right? I think too that this is a sort of subversive take on honor and maintaining honor, and what does that mean? Because is he not, or is he maintaining? I don't know.
Well, and and even to that end, at a certain point when the cops catch up to Genobe, his manservant, the one who's got him the money in the first place, basically takes blame for all the murders. Which at that point in the movie, I thought, oh shit, he's gonna do something really subversive and like make it where like Genobe hadn't murdered them and that was somebody else who'd killed them all. Like I thought for a very brief second that this was going to be a thing where like the disciple murdered it, kind of was like framing Genobe the entire time, and that he was going to retain his nobility, but no, that wasn't what happened.
No.
But the manservant gets basically crucified. I mean, literally crucified, I guess.
Yeah.
And gets, because he was good. He was trying to be a proper servant for his
and like
master.
you said, the angel on his shoulder, right? Always trying to get him to do that kind of honorable, right thing. It's such a dark film, but like you said, it's just so delicious.
It really, really is. And in the end, we really haven't talked about, aside from the staging of it all, how gorgeous it really all of it is. I mean, like. The gore sequences, again, because he shoots it in black and white, and such stark black and white, are so well done and so arresting, because it's just basically this realistic looking blood spurt that happens when he kills all of these people. It is a ridiculously violent movie,
and he just kills everyone
without real remorse.
Nope.
I mean, like, it's just, you did me wrong and I'm going to kill you. I don't care if it's an innocent child. This is. Sorry.
This is it, right? And that takes us, I mean, back to the title, right? Here he is. Now he's stuck in this kind of loop of he's always going to have to do this, right? He's going to have to resort to violence, murder, bloodshed, mayhem.
And the beautiful thing about the movie is it ends with a postscript about how the revenge took place. The Ronin took their revenge, and that Genobe was not a part of it. And like, it's such you could see it as such like why did he add that in? I think it's so wonderful. Like, it's such a, because it's like it's just a twist of the knife. Fuck you. Like, you know what? I'm not even going to give you the satisfaction of showing that you didn't do this. I'm just going to put it on a very, very brief postscript, and then boom, credits out. Go get out of the theater.
Run away.
Right.
You know who didn't like these films?
Pauline Kael.
I don't know. Vincent Canby.
Really?
Yeah. Writing in the New York Times in 1974. Here's what I want to I want to read this. I mean, this is where I think that should I just say he doesn't get it?
Sure, why not?
So, and this is a weird way to open this like short review,
but
I don't probably not, right? I don't know. Let's see. So here's the opening line to this review. Because humor is in such short supply at the movies these days, one must be forgiven searching for it in the wrong places, as in a long, seriously intended Japanese samurai film.
Like, okay, is that what you were like? I don't understand that. I don't understand. That's like asking.
I know
that why Blazing Saddles wasn't a more straightforward Western.
Right. But then, like, there's no mention here of like the stuff we just talked about, right? So it's like, Demons is based on this kabuki play. Okay, but what about the other stuff it's based on? Because that's important, right? I mean, I think that adds a plot. So it's just like, oh, he's just a shabby down at the heels, samurai warrior and a faithless courtesan. But she's not a courtesan because that's a prostitute. She's a geisha. She's an entertainer. So here I am like picking nits with like Canby's language, but it matters, right?
Well, specifically because the movie makes a point of making it matter, right? I mean, like, if you're going to...
Right. And also the style is soft, bogus, essentially frivolous.
Okay.
So that, where is it? So by the time a dying husband clasped the severed head of his wife to him for one last kiss, I was ready to say, rats.
Darn it. I will say that I think Canby's wrong on a whole slew of points here, but I did think that this was perversely funny in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
There's scenes where once he's cut off Coleman's head and they're moving it around.
Sure.
I'm like, look, I know I shouldn't be laughing at this, but this is.
But that's that kind of, again, perverse. That's the kind of laughter we get in horror films, right? We're kind of uncomfortable, kind of like, you shouldn't do, like, you shouldn't kill a baby, right? You shouldn't like do this with that, but I'm uncomfortable and I'm going to laugh at it because I don't really know what else to do.
Right.
It's also absurd, right? One last thing from Mr. Canby. Mr. Matsumoto, one of Japan's new young directors, was represented here last year by Funeral Parade of Roses, an equally solemn, though even sillier melodrama about Tokyo drug pushers and male prostitutes and their lives of noisy desperation.
I don't know what to say to that, really. I mean, like,
I would just say fuck off.
I mean,
if he were here.
Like, how joyless must your life as a reviewer be when you're faced with, look, I don't know, like, if you see, it's just so dumbfounding, but
it is.
When you're presented with something like this so novel and so different, like, how can you not be at least a little invigorated by it? Like, even if it's a piece of shit, if it swings for the fences, if it does something different that you haven't seen before, like, you're sitting here in 1969. I mean, I get it. If you're just a dyed-in-the-wool disciple of Godard and Truffaut, and you want something, maybe the subversion of that new wave piece, maybe that angers you, I guess. But how can you call it frivolous?
Right.
I mean, how do you misunderstand that they're not male prostitutes?
Right.
And that Eddie is not a drug pusher.
Right.
And that the story that you're being told, why are you focusing on all the wrong things?
Right.
And okay, so fast forward
and it's not noisy desperation.
Right. Look, I mean, I get it. Look, it's a 1960s movie wrapped up in an art. Like, when I say that, I mean like an Austin Powers kind of flashy. We're gonna do Danger Diabolic, right? A little bit with Funeral Parade of Roses. There's a little bit. I mean, they're kissing cousins. They're not brother and sister,
right?
But a little bit of that flair, right, is what I'm really kind of speaking. And obviously, they're set in the same time frame. It's fine, whatever. I don't understand going into 1971 and what else are you watching that is making you think? Okay, maybe you just got out of a shit ton of really heavy just crime and rape dramas, but this is not what that is.
Right.
This is I don't know what you want from this movie, and I don't know. It seems like he's going in with an expectation of like the studio put out a really funny trailer for this, and he was just pissed off that
right. I mean, that's weird though.
Right. Like, what would you expect? One, because he had seen Funeral Parade of Roses. So he's an avant-garde experimental filmmaker.
Yeah.
So because you know. So you go into Demons expecting a laugh riot?
What, you're expecting like The Hidden Fortress?
Right. I don't understand what. Yeah, I don't get it at all.
This is where what makes it rather appealingly comic is not the English translation provided by vapid subtitles, though they are pretty funny, but the borrowed solemnity the director uses to decorate his movie, which looks like an expensive film school exercise. This wears the furrowed brow of a 10-year-old boy struggling to recite Thanatopsis without having the vaguest idea what he's saying. I don't know that I've ever read anything more wrong than this. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, there are a lot of times why, look, I don't think that every critic who doesn't agree with me is wrong and is terrible, right? But this, I just don't get.
Look, I could see you turning off. Like, I could see the violence turning you off of this film. I can see the dourness turning you off of this. But to dismiss it because it is one thing and not the one thing that you wanted is bullshit.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah. I don't get it. It makes, I don't know. And to even like everything takes place at night, which permits a lot of fancy lighting effects, stark contrast between light and shadow. that sort of thing. Like when you
right, the style of the film,
right? Like when you dismiss that without even taking time to consider why.
Right, and so do you dismiss any sort of color grading in any film? Right? I mean, like I don't understand. Like, I mean, is all of that just fluff and nonsense? Because there's a style here. And one wildly fucking different than the style of Funeral Parade of Roses. So if nothing else, acknowledge that there's range there. I mean, look, and if you don't like Funeral Parade of Roses, and I mean, like, why would you go? I don't know. Why would you go in to review this at this point?
Why are you watching this? Why
and
are
also,
you
like? Why are you publishing a review of Demons when you fucking know that? Like, who's going to read that? Who's going to go see it?
Well, this was 74.
Okay,
I just mean that, like, so the review's written in 70.
No, I get that, but even then, like, you think that this is not breaking U.S. box office records in 71.
No, but there was more of an avant-garde, more of an art house outlet, right? Especially in New York, than there is now. I mean, because like even in New York, you're limited to a handful of places. I mean,
right? How many theaters could this have possibly played in New York City?
One. so no, I'm just saying maybe. I get it, right? And it was probably there for like.
So Canby's pissed off. He has to go to a midday Wednesday screening across town.
No, Sunday. The film, which was shown at the First Avenue screening room Sunday, will be repeated there at noon and midnight today and tomorrow. So it's there for like 3 days. I mean, like,
so I've got to get this to press for the next two fucking screenings to see if it'll sell out.
Don't go see this. Like,
so we're talking about a potential of 300 people who could have seen this movie during its initial run,
probably
in New York,
maximum, right?
And so he has he has to put together and cobble together a Sunday review before it hits press on Monday morning or for the late edition that same Sunday.
Yeah,
like just don't write the review. Like, I'm pretty sure the Times would have paid for your ticket anyway, and then you could have just
but can you imagine again, like in 74, this was a career. I mean, look, Pauline Kael made a career out of reviewing movies. Well, he was being well compensated for this, and so.
Yeah, and probably like looked upon like with some reverence and and
but this is just wrong. It's just wrong. I find it so.
But here's the thing. This is the safest thing to be wrong about.
Oh, I know. Because no one gives a shit, right?
Right.
We probably care more now than anyone did at the time.
Matsumoto's calling it. Hey, guys, chill out. It's cool, man. It's not
it's like whatever. Yeah. guys, it's cool. No one gives a shit. I don't even care. Right.
I get it. He's wrong, and I appreciate you guys liking my film, but
So that just bothers me. I love this film.
Yeah, no, I don't. I know I say I cringe every time I say yeah, no, but which I say it a lot, so it's awful. But it's wonderful. I think it's so wildly different than Funeral Parade of Roses, and I think it's you put it up with things like The Black Cat and like these other Japanese horror films that exist in the time, and I do think that had this been marketed or would this get picked up by someone like Arrow or one of or Severin or Vinegar Syndrome that could like give it and do it justice and like kind of market it as a Japanese horror film. I know it's not technically quote unquote horror, but I do think the audience for this one is out there. I think the audience for Funeral Parade of Roses is there as well, but I think that exists in that kind of artsy fartsy holier than thou film nerd area. I do think that, I was very pleased that I thought when people walked out of Fort Worth Film Club, I was hearing that this was, one of our favorite screenings, so that type of thing. Gives me,
it's so fresh and so different and so new. How many people have seen something like that?
Right. And that's the thing. And that's really like the kind of the message about these is that you don't get the chance to see something like this very often. And yes, there are avant-garde filmmakers today that are making interesting films and making unique and new films. But I still think they fit within a certain
box.
Yeah, exactly.
And he does not.
And this, I mean, like the 4 films we're going to talk about, these are wildly different. We're going to go to color here in a second, and so I that's why I encourage people to seek these out. Is just because, look, you won't see anything like this. No one is doing anything like this, and no one has done anything like this since he did this. I mean, like, it's crazy to me. I mean, again, it's crazy to me that no one talks about May, because May is just a comedic genius.
Right.
I don't necessarily think that May is the greatest film director ever, but she made 3 ridiculously solid films.
And one that's not as bad as you think.
Right. And one that, yeah, exactly. These movies, I mean, I think they're all masterpieces. And it's just, I don't know why. I know there's only 4, but I just don't know why you don't have serious film criticism that's talking about these over and over and over again.
And you would think that because there's just 4, that would actually be easier.
Right. Yeah, a simple Criterion box set, a simple Kino Lorber. I mean, like, there's all kinds of houses that could put something together and get these back into the conscious and get them screened again. There is an audience for these movies that I think that if you put them out in a draft house and you push them around I think that people would go see these movies. And so I don't know why, we're not doing that.
And coupled with his prominence in the video art world as well. And so, I mean, he's not just a narrative filmmaker. In fact, he's probably less well known as a narrative filmmaker than he is as kind of an experimental documentarian, and this kind of it was at the forefront of some of the Japanese video art stuff.
Right.
And so, again, like, it doesn't,
like, you could put together a retrospective at the Modern here and show his films on the wall, show his his photography. I mean, like, all show everything he's done, right?
Yeah.
Put together essays and then show his films at the museum. I don't know. It's just it seems like this is a slam dunk, especially because we're in a weird time frame where I know we talked about, like, I'm surprised there's certain films that are getting made. But we're also kind of at this weird nadir of, like, everything is just fucking IP, right? So, I mean, it's just, it's so weird. I didn't mean to say it like that, but it seems like there would be a hunger for, especially as we go into, SAG, the Writers Guild,
the strikes
that are coming in the SAG that's going to be upcoming. And I know that those are cyclical and those will happen, but we have all of these outlets where you've got Mubi and you've got Criterion. Just put something out there and see what sticks at this point. What because you've got something that really is,
well. And Mubi does weird, quote unquote weird films like these. I mean, they are more of that kind of ilk of experimental and like uber artsy. So
yeah, Mubi, if you're listening,
get on it, Mubi.
Call us and we'll help you out.
We'll work something out. Let's talk about the War of the 16-year-olds, or War at the Age of 16, which I also
War of
saw.
16s. Yeah, I saw a few of them.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So here's a really short synopsis, followed by a bit of historical context. A young drifter and a precocious 16-year-old girl slowly form a bond in a small town haunted by its wartime past. I really don't know how else to sum this film up, but I will say that this takes place in Toyokawa, and the Toyokawa Naval Air Raid was a large-scale air raid that didn't happen until late in World War II, August 7th of 1945,
right?
I think. There were 135 B-29 bombers and 48 P-51 Mustangs as escorts. The bombers targeted the naval arsenal that was there, civilian population centers, and the fighter jets went after quote-unquote targets of opportunity, which just sounds like people running away to me.
Yeah.
Over 2,000 people died, 452 school children and teenage girls who had been conscripted to work at the arsenal. Some volunteered. So the idea of what 16-year-olds are at war over, from one generation to the next, is this kind of nice subversive idea that's in the film, and one that you think this young woman is kind of being dramatic about certain things. but then placed in this like historical context and considering, I guess, Matsumoto's critique of nationalism and war that we kind of see, I think, especially in Dogura, Magura, and then the one we just talked about, Shura, right? This becomes really kind of complex and interesting in this film, right?
Yeah.
I still don't know about the soundtrack, but
it's very like Cat Stevens kind of like Hal Ashby.
Yeah, I'm just kind of like, well, you know what? I immediately thought of like Midnight Cowboy.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
With the opening, I'm just everybody's talking.
It felt like Matsumoto trying to play in the sandbox of his contemporaries.
Yeah.
In this case of making a film, maybe still subversive, but also like this felt to me like a Downey Sr., like Melvin Van Peebles kind of like film, like, right? Because the color scheme was about the same. You know, it was the way that it kind of flowed, but you know, and I kept when I was watching this, I kept thinking about D-double-G, and I was just like, ugh, God,
because of like generational divide and like family drama
right.
and like lasting impact and toxicity of family drama and war itself.
This
family disintegration, metaphorical ghosts and literal ghosts. Is that why?
Yeah, yes, that's all those
the
things,
idea
right?
of the living dead, sort of.
Right. So we have a drifter who gets off of a train and he comes upon two dead bodies.
He gets off of a truck.
Oh, is it a truck? Okay.
And then one of the things he asks is like, "Where's the train station?"
Okay, that's why I got confused. Right. So he gets off of a truck. He sees that there's a crowd around these two dead bodies, covered. Well, we assume that they're dead, but they're covered in burlap sacks. And he looks over and makes eye contact with this young girl. And then they start walking off together. Basically, there was an emotional connection there. Mm-hmm. And she invites him to her family home for dinner or for lunch. And her mother and father are there. And her mother's lamenting of like, you should really let us know when you're inviting guests over so we can because this is a disservice to your guests. And, you know, this young girl who's 16 is petulant and just a 16-year-old girl, right? She gets angry. She's flighty. She gets angry with her mom, storms off. And at first, there's really nothing too amiss. I mean, like, it's not gotten into Blue Velvet stage where you're like, oh, well, something's kind of rotten in Denmark. No, you're still like, okay, well, this is just a straight up kind of
family drama,
right,
sort of
family drama, like young lovers type, you know, story. And then obviously the history of Tokoyama. I'm not saying it right. Toyokawa. Thank you.
So I typed it that way earlier, and I was like, "That's not right." So I've done that too.
We start getting the history right. We go directly, and the father is giving a tour, or like someone's giving a tour of the naval yard, and basically
it's
telling
him,
the
like some kind of like business. Because he's talking to like other business people, I think, right? And then he's pointing out like people died here, like this happened during the war or whatever, right?
And then there's a this film, like it's difficult to kind of pin down a narrative, right? Because it bounces around. It is like timeline.
Hence my synopsis,
right? And so we find out that the young drifter Jin is drifting because he's gotten a girl pregnant and he's not sure if he wants to marry her or not. So we flash back to that and him leaving and then kind of connecting with this young girl, and she's trying to connect with him essentially. And so they go off to a lake together and, you know, she's trying to get him to go swimming and she strips down naked and to kind of allure him into the water, and he doesn't take the bait. Along the way, we meet a uncle who is suicidal and trying to walk into water, you know, and in this frantic, every time we see him, he is in some sort of distress, usually from the sun about how bright it is or how hot it is, and there's some sort of discomfort that's going on. And he's
also
always
having like war flashbacks too. It seems like where so one night Jin's, you know, is sleeping at this house and he hears something, so he goes out walking, and the uncle sort of attacks him, not realizing what is going on, and you hear him say, you know, wanting to die, sort of, you know, saluting him, and this idea of like, or I should have died with honor, or let me die with honor.
And so
we also, we also learn early on when Jin is talking to Azuna's mother, that's the 16-year-old girl, that Jin's parents who are dead aren't his real parents or weren't his real parents, that he was adopted. He didn't know his mother. And so I think that plays into why he has left his girlfriend, this young woman, back wherever he came from, who's pregnant with his child, is because maybe he's
trying to reconcile his past and figure out a little bit more about himself.
Right.
We go off, and basically the rest of the time for about the first hour of this, hour and 38-minute movie ish, is that, we spend time with the family. We spend time talking to one another and them kind of lamenting and certain aspects of their life. We go to a kind of a resort area and they sit and talk, and again, the girl gets distressed and less distressed, and Jin starts to question the things that are going on around him. Essentially, the older parents that are there are like Azuna's mother and father. Well, who we assume is her father. We find out that the uncle is not really an uncle, but an ex-husband of Azuna's mother, and we find out that he owns the house that they live in, and that the man that is her husband now is obviously her second husband. He comes to us with this crushing line.
That was so good.
There's a line in the film about, and I will paraphrase because I don't know exactly, and of course it's being translated, so it doesn't really matter in this case anyway. But so he says, "Life is like always taking the wrong train, and you can't get off wherever you want. And the fact that you know the name of the last train means nothing." And it's just, at that point, I was just like crumble on the ground.
Yeah.
And
you're just like,
position.
Right. But I know the name of the last train. Let me go back.
What? I don't know. If you don't know, if that doesn't this exemplify the genius of Matsumoto and just how emotionally intelligent and how brutal his films are. That line just devastated me. I was just like, okay, now I'm a puddle of what? I don't know how to watch the rest of this movie anymore.
No, and that was because it was a real kind of because it's like fulcrum sort of moment too.
And it was so nondescript in the way he was just a matter of fact saying it. He out of the blue, just kind of in this conversation, we were all sitting around, and the uncle / ex-husband or first husband is basically having a breakdown because of the sun being too bright, and he's just like, it's just a man who's coming to the realization that his life is fucking.
And Jin is telling a story about an elephant going into the forest looking for an elephant who's left right. And the girl's like, "You're all making fun of me," and so everyone around this guy is losing their shit, and he's just like, "Life is like a train." Like getting on the wrong train.
Like you're always,
and you're
on the
just
wrong
like,
train.
"Oh God,"
and you can never get off.
He has another line late in the end of the film where the uncle first husband has finally committed suicide. Has walked in. There was a lantern festival sort of commemorating the people that died in the air raid, and he walked into the water and
just disappears
and disappears. And so the mother's husband, finds her and says, "We need to go collect your ex-husband's body. He, drowned himself." And she looks back and she says something I forget, and he just says, "They all committed suicide. The dead don't come back." And I was just like, fucking hell, man, this guy, this guy just delivers these lines. But I mean, he's saying he's been dead for a long time, right? I mean, you couldn't have done anything. I mean, I think that's what he says. You did all you could. And then he says
right.
They killed themselves a long time ago. And
Vincent Canby hated that guy.
I bet. He's just like a 10-year-old who's talking about Socrates and doesn't understand.
So after we get past the celebration, I guess, the recognition of the 2,200 people who passed away, we come to find out that Azuna is actually Jen's mother, and that the reason that she's wanted him to love her is that she passed away at the age of 16 after she gave birth to him, and then she died in the air raid, and she's never been able to progress past 16, but then she's never known the love of her son fucking devastating, man. This whole movie, like, and it's so like I again talking about shit that's never been done again. Like, how have we never seen a movie? And maybe I'm just missing it, but about a grown, almost adult male,
because he's 30. Yeah, I think he's meant to be like 30 years old. Yeah.
An adult male who meets his biological mother, who he's never really known, at the age where she passed away, and that dynamic of a young girl knowing. I mean, and like it's questionable whether as a ghost Azuna knew Jin was. I mean, that why she was attracted to him, and that she's also embodied in an older woman that exists and that Jin is also attracted to. And I mean, like, and attracted to not in a sexual sense, but attracted to an emotional sense.
Right.
But this idea of us being able to go back and understand who our parents were, or at the very least sympathize and empathize with them because they were children at one point and they all had to grow up, and we understand what they had to grow up and under the trials and tribulations that they, and the things that they never got to experience. And like, she's like talking about how I'm never going to be 17. I'm never going to be 18.
And it's all these different voices from the other girls that died there, right? I'm never going to know what it is to be loved. I'm never going to know what it is to love. I don't know what I'm like at 17. I never got to be 17. I mean, it's those voiceovers, man.
And so yes, there's a part of it where all of these people that Jin has stumbled into a town where the entire town is a ghost story. Everyone that he's encountered is dead. And at a certain point, they're all playing out, different versions of a life that either was or could have been.
Right.
And, Jin is able to see his bloody mother at the end of the story, and kind of the movie all ends up with Jin and Azuna walking down a road together, and then basically making a pinky promise and him not to forget her. And it's just fucking, it is.
Yeah.
I did not think that. Like I said, I talked to you about earlier, I was like really glad that I was able to find. This is the hardest one to find. And like, I didn't think I'd walk away from this one thinking this was my favorite one, but fuck me, man.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think look, I get the genius of the others, but like the emotional impact of this movie is fucking devastating. And it's so good. And again, how in the fuck are we not talking about this movie? Yeah. How does this movie exist on a DVD that has no English subtitles? I know. Like, I just don't. Like, you don't. And like, it's all this stuff. We talk about like found movies and forgotten movies, and there's a lot of great things out there. But anytime you talk about a forgotten movie, someone's seen it, right? I mean, like, there's certain things. There's enough of an audience for people to still say, "Oh, I'm going to put this out there." No one. I wouldn't know about this unless we were doing a Matsumoto, episode. And like this, I cannot fathom how you can't walk away from this and just be blown away by it. And again, not that it has to be your the levels of which this is playing with, and like and take away, like not to take away, but like I'm not even talking about how it's touching on war and the impacts of war. And so for my interpretation of the uncle is that the uncle died in the air raid, and that the mother and father were what the manifestations were that had to pick up the pieces of it. And this is why he's so jaded about all of it, right? It's just about like, I got to live in a town. I've got to live in a city, and I've got to work in it, and I've got to make a life after it's been flattened, after everything that's been good about it has been taken away, it's been destroyed, and now we've got to come back here and pick up the pieces. And of course I'm going to be fucking pissed about my life and about I'm the one that's left here. And yes, it's horrible that the people that died and they won't ever get to experience life, but I'm also here, and I've also got to experience this life knowing all of that, plus trying to move forward. I don't know, everything in this film, like the last like 20 minutes of this movie are just so beautiful. It is amazing.
There's a moment, and it might be the train quote, where it just like turns,
right,
and it's almost then like relentless in its kind of emotional attack on you. It doesn't speed up, it doesn't do anything fancy, except all of a sudden you start to feel a whole lot more about what's going on. And I think there was, I don't know, the first maybe 30 minutes or so, I'm kind of like, what are we doing here?
Right.
I'm just like, okay,
Well,
okay. I'm like, this is
it does feel like a Downey Senior film,
yeah,
right? It feels like it's almost like a parody of the films of the time, right? It's not like it's, and you can kind of see the ethereal moments in it, but it never like kind of solidifies or gels until it does.
It does.
Right.
Yeah, no, exactly. Until it does. And then I'm like, oh, that's why we're here. Okay. And then it's like, and then you can't untangle yourself from it.
And it never goes cheap, right? It never I know that the pinky promise sounds cloying, but it's not. It's really not. There's just this really touching moment of a 16-year-old girl telling her grown son to don't forget about me.
Right.
You'll always love me, right?
Right.
And like she's never known him. He's never known her. That whole, I mean, like this her spirit, who's never been able to experience anything past the age of 16, who's died a violent death, and who's come in contact with her grown son and been able to see who he is now, like, is just desperately wanting to be remembered. It's, man, I don't know.
No. Something that I really like about all of these films, all of Matsumoto's work, is how wide open it is to interpretation. I mean, like you just said, we didn't even touch on the war stuff. We didn't even dig into or peel back the layers of that fucking onion about sort of what Matsumoto is commenting on in all of these movies about cultural, political institutions, tradition, progress, right? The lasting impacts of war, of the effects of war, right? And how that affects, a family kind of disintegration. This film too touches on, generations, right? Like we sort of talked about. These 16-year-olds that got killed in a war, right? Or if you look at Azuna and her mother, I mean, just as they are, this 16-year-old girl who's, I want to go on a picnic. I'm just going to bitch about everything or just like complain about everything. And this mother who was alive during all that, and she kind of says like, she doesn't know what we had to go through when we were 16.
Right.
But again, like you hear parents say that all the time. And this time you're like, oh shit, yeah. Okay. I can imagine that must have been fucking terrible. So like, we don't even touch on that and like the horrors of that. And yet this film was still so rich.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
I like to think that this is a town that there's always a djinn coming to. I laugh, but I was just like,
there's always someone.
Like, because you'll see, I mean, assuming that everyone's a ghost, right? And everyone's a spirit, you see ghosts in the background that aren't interacting with djinn. I'd like to think that eventually they'll get their turn. There's a djinn coming.
But again, like this is another, I think, nice interpretation here, because I mean, there's a reading where it's like, no, not everyone's a ghost. It's just her, and she's just more of like a reincarnation. Right. These are people who did survive and are still there to try and like build and pick up the pieces. And yes, we all deal with trauma in different ways. And so Uncle Husband is just off his rocker because he's shell shocked.
Right.
I mean, but again, like, yeah, all of these people are ghosts, right? I mean, they're all, literal ghosts, but then we can also read it as metaphors and sort of like again, like The Walking Dead, they killed themselves a long time ago.
Right.
And they were dead and they're never coming back, even if they're still right here.
And what I love about this too is that the reveal that Azuna is Jin's mother is just matter of fact.
Yep.
This is not some M. Night Shyamalan, like, we're going to roll back the tape and, oh shit, did I never remember that he wore red the entire time?
Oh, right. The doorknob was red.
This is just played as a I mean, like, and again, I'm not trying to shit totally on
Not totally, though. A little bit.
Although they do bring up the Sixth Sense in the movie. They said it. The couple like, are you aware of the Sixth Sense? She's like, the Sixth Sense? I'm like, yeah, no, we've all seen the movie, all right? And we know. Like, it's very prescient for a 1973 movie.
It was kind of like breaking the fourth wall, too. They were really asking us. It was a meta commentary on cheap thrills.
But it's never done as a gimmick, right? It is just it is just presented to the audience to do with what you will. And so that's what makes it so refreshing as well. Like any other film, any other filmmaker wouldn't have had the ability to do that. They wouldn't have understood the need to do that and would have made it a point of we're going to drop the needle here. And no, it is just, yeah, she's your mom.
Yeah.
And
that's another thing with his work too, is he just gives you that stuff and he doesn't try to do any tricks with that. He's just like, here. Okay.
Right. Do with it what you will.
Right.
Exactly right.
Yeah. But I mean, like in Funeral Parade of Roses, I mean, here's this sex scene. Yeah, I'm not gonna like do anything fancy. I'm not gonna like call any more attention to it, but I am gonna make you watch it.
Right. Except for the 4 people who walked out of our screening. They walked.
Yeah, that's fine.
Look,
not everyone likes sex, which is weird, but he can't stop laughing now.
You just said sex.
It's from the guy. So you've done IP. Right? You laughed at sex. You laughed at other, I think, sex stuff too earlier. I can't fucking remember.
Anything else on the War of the 16-year-olds?
No. I think I was really surprised by how much I really like this. And again, I think this is the most straightforward narrative-wise of his films. And I mean, I don't think that it's straightforward, but I think compared to the rest, it seems to be more more of a traditional kind of.
I can
like
see
narrative.
how it's seen as his lightest. I can see why they took the. I mean, if they're going to do, if out of the 4, if you're not going to translate one of them, I would say it makes sense that this is not one that you translate. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not great. It's just I can understand why this is not going to like if you gave this. If this is the only film that he did, I don't necessarily know if we would be talking about him in terms we're talking about him in.
Sure.
But it's still I still think it's a wonderful one.
I think it carries more weight for what it's not, right? And then the fact that it is more straightforward, and it's not like it's not like the film we're going to talk about next. So I think it does give that room for more of an emotional connection. Right? You're not kind of busy trying to piece together the fragments like you are in Funeral Parade of Roses. You're not kind of recoiling from some of the violence and some of the subversion in Shura, right? So you're just kind of here in this film that seems light until, again, like it's not, until it's really heavy and deep. And then you're like, oh, wow.
I like to think of like someone being Matsumoto's agent and like, come on, man, all they want is the same thing you did before. Just give them that thing. Like 3 different films. Come on, dude. Like,
they are so different.
Like you wouldn't know.
Brilliant though.
You wouldn't know that they were made by the same person.
No, I guess not.
I mean, like really, I don't. There's nothing that would indicate from Funeral Parade of Roses into Shura. Really, I mean, really.
No,
other than the stark black and white use and the gore effects, but that wasn't the gore effects weren't that unique. I mean, they're not that iconic to what he's doing. I mean, they're useful, and they're but I don't think that they're like I said, they're not. He came up with those, right? But
right. No one's like, hey, you need to go to for black and white gore effects, Toshio Matsumoto.
Like that Hitchcock guy, he doesn't know shit, but
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like and then coming into War of the 16-year-olds, you would not have known,
especially with the music. I mean, again, like this really kind of folk rock music playing over it. I mean, it's so. I don't know. It's a real interesting choice, and again, I think knowing the translation of those songs would be really interesting because of how it, what it might be commenting on, but. I mean, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, no, I think it's maybe the perfect choice of music because of how it lulls you into this again, right? You're going into this, it's just this kind of light family, like drama. Oh, no, it's a ghost story. Oh, no, it's something else. I mean,
right. Azuna kept acting up until like 2020. I mean, she had like a music career and like, so, I mean, I don't know how big of a star she was, but.
All that as a ghost.
Right. For someone who died at 16, really did a lot.
She hung around. And the dead do come back.
All right, let's try to dig into
Dogura Magura. Yes. So this was in 1988, and so there was a 15-year break from War of the 16-year-olds to this. In between then, he's doing a ton of shorts and a lot of experimental like video art work. Just throwing that out there. He did Mona Lisa in 73. Did you watch that? Man, you got to watch this shit, Wiseman.
Look, so you watch either way.
So real quick on Mona Lisa. This was a short film. Let's call it a piece of video art where he takes the Mona Lisa.
The what? Okay.
So it's this painting right? I don't know.
It's that Slick Rick song, right?
Yes, Mona Lisa, which is what I think about every time someone says Mona Lisa. But where he sort of plays with this kind of convention that people like Warhol and Duchamp played with, where you take this kind of mass-produced thing, or in this case, this ubiquitous piece of art, and you recontextualize it. So he projected it and then would project things on top of it, kind of sort of, altering the image a bit, psychedelic colors, whatever. But again, like getting someone to look at it in a different way, to consider, Mona Lisa's backstory in a different way because of how it's presented to you. Right. And this became like a big kind of famous one for him. So that was 73. That was like right after, I believe.
The War of the 16-Year-Olds was filmed in 73. It didn't actually get a release until 76,
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
Maybe Mona Lisa's up pushed it over the edge. Like,
yeah, I think so. That's when they were like, this dude. I bet he made a really cool ghost story. All right, Dogura Magura was...
But what we're not going to do is we're not going to translate it into English.
Because...
why?
Let's make it more spooky. What are they saying? I don't know. Oh my God, that's so scary.
I love the IMDb reviewers. Like, I'm a Japanese student, so I got some of it.
Some of it. You're like,
that's a long movie to watch.
I could
see watching Funeral Parade of Roses and Shura and not knowing necessarily the language they're speaking. It would still be rough because Shura is 2 hours and change. But I mean, like, what are you getting out of the War of the 16-Year-Olds? Like, it's not really visually arresting until you get to the scene, until you get to the scene, the scene at the lake where they're all beating on the drums and the celebration scene, right? But there's really that striking visual. Look, the color palette's beautiful. Yeah. The film is beautiful. But it's not that movie. Again, you wouldn't. I'm not associating that to.
But there's no real visual language that says, "Oh, she's his mom,"
right,
or "Oh, he's looking for a mother." Yeah. But I mean, aren't we all? So, Dogura Magura. This is 1988. This is the synopsis. A young man kills his bride on the day of his marriage and goes insane. He wakes up in an asylum with no memory, left in the hands of two mysterious doctors who relate his condition with his biological identity. This is a non-linear bit of mindfuckery brilliance that I found so thoroughly enjoyable and trippy and completely untrustworthy.
Yeah. I mean, it's like... again, all of the things we could say, I mean, like Monty Python and Lynch and like, Gilliam and all the things that it either was influenced by or clearly influenced. There's no way to talk about, I don't know how to talk about this. Because one, I really truly need to see it again. I've only seen it once. Yeah. And so it's so dense and it's like I said, it's, like if you think of, I hate to compare it to Shutter Island, but that's
okay. But no, yeah, I mean, I could see that
similar structure of Shutter Island, where you don't really. I mean, in Shutter Island obviously has a reveal, and you understand what the plot. Like this, you really don't. Like you've got a ridiculously unreliable narrator.
I thought more about Cure with this one too.
Yeah,
because we have a character who doesn't remember anything. Who right. and we also are sort of wondering like, wait, what's real? Who's not real in this? Look, I mean, this is a film that goes back to this idea of moral accountability as well, and who's responsible for this.
Again, classes should be taught.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea here is that we've got two. I mean, so we've got one young man who's in an insane asylum, and you've got two seeming psychiatrists who are trying to convince him of this generational.
Basically, it's like inherited mental illness,
right?
Inherited. They call it ICP, and some I can't remember. Like, yeah, it is. It's like the inherited clown posse. But basically they're saying like they're trying to say like you killed your bride because one of your ancestors did the same thing. So you're just reenacting history.
It's passed through your genetics, right? But also taking the genetic piece out of it, this whole idea of history repeating itself and not learning and not being able to not studying it, there is so
much there.
going on
Right.
in this movie.
But there's also this idea of these two psychiatrists that were basically trying to get him to do this thing anyway. Right. So this was something I'm like, okay, so they're trying to do all this stuff to prove their theory.
Right.
So I mean, then it's like who's accountable here?
I don't want to jump ahead. I'm going to have to, because again, it doesn't really make like the narrative piece here. Speaking
of like time fucking jumps and like where are we?
We jump from to feudal Japan to modern day to going back a generation and another generation. Like we're stuck in like this is set in the 20s, right? So like this insane asylum's in the 20s. We go back to feudal Japan and like puppetry.
Yeah.
And then we go back a generation or two before that in the same character. And they're all played by the same actor.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I love the fact that one of the psychiatrists gets so caught up in the insanity of what he's trying to do and what's happening that he literally goes insane himself. I think that's what Brock and I will find here is that we will talk ourselves stupid.
Yes.
Trying to explain this movie.
Oh shit, too late. Damn.
So we open up on we open up on a boy waking up in an insane asylum, and again, this insane asylum room.
He's 19.
We come back to over and over again, and he starts to hear this voice from another room saying, "Brother-in-law, brother-in-law, brother-in-law," and then we get one of the psychiatrists comes in and tells him, basically what has happened is that you've killed your bride on the night before your wedding, and he's like, but he's trying to remember. He cannot remember anything.
Mm-mm.
I don't know how to explain it from there. I mean, again, there's so much that happens because when we go into the mind of the boy starts to glom on and to start to accept the theory of genetic being passed down. So then he starts to kind of prophesize it. I mean, as well, like he teaches a class in his own head full of like chickens and other people that are in the insane asylum. It is a unbelievable scene.
Yeah, I called it bug nuts.
Yes, it's very bug nuts.
It's very bug nuts. Yeah. But and so these two psychiatrists are very much kind of opposites of each other too. One is unhinged. I mean, just like a mad scientist, and the other seems more staid, more scientific, maybe more focused on empirical data. Right. The other one's like, let's do experiments. Let's let everybody just act out these kind of insanities in their head and see what happens. Yeah, people out in the yard like digging, trenches, and one woman thinks she's Anna Pavlova, and so she's dancing across the courtyard. And then they're never in the same room together, but like they will come in and talk to
which I thought for a minute that they were the same person.
I know, I did too.
And so yes, the way the scenes play out is that the psychiatrist will be talking to the boy, and then he'll turn and on the other side of the desk he'll be talking, and then the scene will shift into a different time frame or a different mindset. It's all bonkers. It's crazy. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't.
I had a thread that I was going to go to, and I completely fucking forgot it. Because again, it's hard to pull on any of this. Oh, so the original story is that the original murder happened because he killed his bride and was trying to keep her from decaying, essentially.
Well, he was a court artist,
right.
And was like kind of like the right hand, a close advisor to the Chinese emperor. And what he saw, and he fell in love with this woman who was in the emperor's court, and so the emperor valued this guy so much that he gave him this woman to marry. Now, look, men cannot give men other women. I just want to put that out there. But they were, by all accounts, very much in love. Well, our artist started to see kind of corruption in the court due to the emperor's wife, et cetera. And so he needed to find a way to show, the emperor what was going on he couldn't just go up and tell the emperor. So he told his wife, like, I love you, but I have to kill you because I need to do this thing. And she's like, cool, I'm good with that. But the body starts to decay faster, and he can paint the body to depict this story. And so then he has to go kill someone else to keep on painting. And then he has to go kill someone else. And then he becomes sort of infatuated with the act of killing. This original artist eventually flees to Japan, right? And then somehow the genetics trace back to our character.
Right.
Right? Okay.
And so then that happens, I guess, late 1800s when the next killing happens, and then they're trying to convince him that he is that person.
Right. Because there was this scroll that
Right.
that these doctors were looking for. Or there was like a legend, I don't know, and then this woman finds the scroll and
We need to watch it again. Basically we need to watch it. And
Yeah,
I don't know if another single viewing will help us piece all of this
No,
together.
no. I mean, I think it's a really well, here's the other thing too that I mean, this is basically. So this is based on a 1935 novel of the same name by Yumino Kayasuka. Right. I mean, and it on one hand, right, it is an examination of like Freudian analysis.
Mhm.
And on the other, apparently the writer knew people within this Kyushu Imperial University, right? The psychoanalysis department at this university, which is like where we are. And so he was able to get like inside information and sort of give a kind of insight to the practices that were going on. And so I wonder like how much that we see in this film was actually sort of like, happening, sort of like experimentation. But the movie seems to be a kind of realization of the novel written by the character, right?
Right.
Now I have to explain how I got there, don't I?
Charlie Kaufman adaptation.
I mean,
That's great.
kind of, right? Yeah, yes. At a certain point, they're in. So this one doctor, the kind of crazy doctor, kills himself, and the more staid doctor takes our character into the office, and he looks around and he picks up like a manuscript. He's like, "What's this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a novel called Dogura Magura, which this patient wrote and actually put myself and Dr. Miyake as characters in. You should read it." And he's like, "No, I'm good. I don't want to read that." and that's the last we hear of it.
Right.
But that's it, isn't it? I mean, isn't that what this movie is?
Yeah.
So there, we figured it out.
makes perfect sense.
But I mean, I don't know, these deeper ideas of like, how do we deal with not just mental illness, but with mentally ill, and how do we, again, what are they accountable for? Because I mean, one of the doctors says something like, "Well, without intent, we couldn't hold this guy."
Right.
And you're like, "Oh, okay."
There's number. There's so many lines, and this is, and it being subtitled makes it and so rapid fire. It makes it hard to catch all this stuff and then retain it. But there's one line. There's a couple lines in there. One of them was like the mind or the brain doesn't think that the brain thinks, and like there's just so many things like that. Like there's
but the brain exists to prove the brain or something, right?
Yeah. There's so much like that where he's just like kind of spouting off and shouting into the ether of these like crazy non sequiturs that he thinks are, of import and weight, and I don't know. It shifts so well between what we see in the mind of the crazy kid and not to be insensitive, but
his nickname is Looney Lad, I think.
Right.
So essentially, they call him Crazy Kid,
right?
Yeah.
And then from what he's seeing to what's actually happening, and again, you really never know what's actually happening. Right? There's no. It never relents, and it never gives you any sort of grace to actually understand who is actually. Who's actually pulling the strings? Who's actually right? Who's actually real or not? I mean, ultimately, we're left to believe that this all just happened inside the mind of Looney Lad, right? Because we're left at the end of this movie after he sees himself out in the courtyard, and that convinces himself that he is the person that was, or that he's a twin, or that something along those lines. That he agrees with their ICP, theory. And that the person he sees out in the courtyard then very violently kills a bunch of other people so that he can perform the painting ritual again. And then after all that happens, we're left with Looney Lad waking up yet again, but in more of a dilapidated cell, in the same room. But it's decayed, and then that's really the end of the movie. But I think, and again, one of these focusing on what's actually happening in a Matsumoto film also seems like you're missing the point. Right. This is all about what do we do with this, not learning from history or repeating ourselves, and really, is there any sort of, I think it's really interesting, the commentary on generational trauma and how we carry that over, because again, he's coming out of post-war Japan. I mean, like, and also, I know this is an 88, but still this idea of us trying to find an identity and trying to figure out who the fuck we are.
Oh yeah.
In this sense of like, all of this tragedy that's happened and all this violence that's happened before us. It's really, really,
well, and that shit doesn't go away. I mean, again, like grief, trauma. I mean, we can figure out how to deal with it or figure out how to kind of live with it and get better from it, but it doesn't go away. I mean, so 88 and post-war Japan. Look, you're still dealing with these terrible acts, and I mean, so from the war that was there and that this nation was part of, to having 2 atomic bombs dropped on them. There's a lot to process there. I'm guessing it's going to take a while. I mean, and you see German filmmakers wrestle, right, with a lot of those ideas as well, and they're still going to.
Well, and there's a thread here where Looney Lad actually starts to latch on to the horror that was generationally carried down. So like he starts to read the scroll and get excited about it and want to recreate it. And then the psychiatrists who are studying it start to put themselves in those roles as well.
And they give him the scroll. I mean, so again, like...
Right, and so, and trying to perpetrate it, right?
Trying to enact this kind of, trying to prove their theory, right? Trying to enact the very theory. But again, I mean, that raises a question of how do we even then become aware of some of these generational tragedies, right? I mean, how do we find out? Then how do we learn from that? And what are we learning from that? And what do we need to learn from that?
And these stories, I mean, again, with an unreliable narrator, these stories that we're telling ourselves, are they even fucking real?
Right.
Did they happen?
Right. Did they happen? Did they happen to someone else? Why are we telling them? Right. I think this film, along with, Funeral and well, all of the other films actually, sort of, I have this connective thread of almost like a human duality, right? We are more than one person. I mean, we see Looney Lad doesn't want to believe he's this person, right? He's like, no, I'm not that person. I'm this person. And at one point, one of the doctors says, oh yeah, you're a twin. I mean, so this idea of like, who are we, right? We're split in two. The 2 doctors, right? Are they one person and they're just different halves of a person? I mean, even our samurai, right? This is what a samurai is supposed to be. This is what he is. And I mean, you can make the connections with the other films, but I think this is an interesting idea too. Again, like, who are we? What kind of mask are we wearing at this time? Why are we wearing it? Right? And what fucking stories am I going to tell about this mask?
Right. It's, normally without this podcast, I don't think either one of us go through and sit there and plow through a director's filmography.
But, not like this.
Right.
I mean, not,
not in rapid succession.
Right.
And then whereas you can look at like how disparate like Elaine May's films were from one another. I mean, I guess not necessarily the first 2, but I mean, like her next 2, nothing. I don't know. Being able to see this in kind of a holistic, big picture view of watching all 4 of these films as kind of the same thing, it really is kind of eye opening. I mean, like his themes carry over so well over all these films,
and completely different types of films,
right? And they're so exactly. I mean, it's and like it never. There's like he's not gonna. There's not a fluff moment in any of these movies. Like I really wish more had been written about him, because I would have really loved to learn more about his process, because it feels like there's nothing wasted in any of these.
Right.
You can't point to a scene like the Dogura, and I mean, like, there's so much insanity going on that it's hard. It would be easy to say that some of that's not pointed, but all of it kind of moves to an end goal. And it's always continuing to go back to the story. So like this.
Yeah. Could you imagine cutting something out of that?
No, I don't.
I mean, that's what I mean.
No,
right. Yeah.
And
I'd be more confused.
It's and to like the visuals of again. The visuals of all of these films are so wildly different, but also so wildly inventive. Like this felt like watching a live action Paprika to me. Like this felt like, I mean, especially because the one of the psychiatrists kind of feels like the bald, crazy guy in Paprika. But it just like I don't know. Like, and now also watching this too. I wonder how many other filmmakers are inspired by Matsumoto. We just don't hear about it because this felt like Inception. Like this felt like there was a lot of like as he's running through the hall, right? You're just going through layers and layers of things, and when he's running through the hallway and all the papers are flying everywhere, it looks like explosions are happening. Like the sequence in the
and that is such a kind of visual metaphor for what's happening in his head, and then the universe or the building that he's being kept in, right? We see it as like now it's decayed and disintegrated again, right? Another visual metaphor for like what's happening inside his mind. So,
and another one of those ones where there's so much stuff going on in the background, right? That you couldn't like.
And I have to read too.
Well, and that's that makes a good point though, because I think all of these would have been better served seeing them on a big screen where you can kind of take in the entirety of it all. Subtitles work better on a big screen where you're not trying to focus on a little. I mean, I know it's different. And it's difficult regardless, but having it on a 75-foot screen where the letters are much bigger, it's easier to take in the entirety of the picture.
You read large print books too.
I do, yeah, I do. I have a fucking.
I couldn't. I just sorry. Go no. Keep going.
And I read slow, so
it's always a fucking joke with this guy.
But there's so much going on in this, and again, you want to catch like this is like listening to Robin Williams.
Yeah,
like I mean, there's like when they're going off on the diatribes, it's so rapid fire that I sat there and I watched this. And I'm like, okay, there's no way I'm gonna catch everything in this. So I'm gonna watch as best I can. But you cannot be distracted. This is one of the things why the theater would help, because it helps just to not be distracted, to have darkness all around you to watch. I mean, like, because it's so beautiful what's going on, and it's so intense that it like you just need to be able to be.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't know about you, but I watched these as director Matsumoto would have wanted me to on my laptop.
Right. Yeah. Just like the director envisioned it. On a 15-inch widescreen.
Oh wow!
Somehow heartbreak feels good in a place like this.
My couch, on my lap. Yeah.
This one is the hardest to describe. I feel like we do it the least. Just the amount of we do it the disservice, because it's again. I want people to watch all of these. I don't want to discourage. I feel like there's no way to like encourage anybody to watch. I don't know what you would do. This is like Brazil. Like, I mean, like if you were to put together a trailer of this feels the most like a kind of Gilliam Brazil.
I could. I mean, just how much is happening within his head after the kind of like,
and just the visualness of it all. This feels very Monty Python-esque. It's not funny. I mean, there's funny parts of it. Actually, when they first see I don't know the bald psychiatrist and the picture starts talking, I was just like,
but I mean, this is a very kind of surreal humor, right? And I think again, this goes back to Matsumoto's involvement and engagement with experimental avant-garde video art and work like that, where he's carrying that kind of surreal humor over. I mean, you look at surrealists like Duchamp, like Dali, and even guys who were more involved with Dada. And it was never a sort of winking humor. It was a humor presented straight-laced, right? And just as a matter of fact, which is what's going on here.
Right.
I never felt like anything again was like played for laughs or like a Three Stooges kind of, elbow nudge, like wink, wink.
Or if you even like put it to like the first 30 minutes of Beau is Afraid, right? Where that's hilarious. And it's similar.
It's all
right.
Psychological realism.
But even then, that still is played for laughs. I feel like I could have watched an entire movie that was just in Looney Lad's head. Like, I mean, I could have felt like that. I could have watched that play out the entirety of the film.
Maybe Ari Aster has seen this film.
I don't know. I'd have to ask. I don't know. I don't have his number. I think I got a new phone, and he
didn't make the cut.
Yeah. He did.
Jason got a new flip phone. He went back. He went old school, and
That's how we're doing
it
it.
only has so much storage.
We're going retro, baby. I got my top 5. I got 5 friends. Basically, that's it.
I didn't make it either, Ari. It's okay.
I don't know what else to say about this. Again, like this talks. So I would say that for 88, again, is one of these things. Like I don't see anybody talking about these themes really. And if you do, they're in such pointed terms. Like he never directs you to think one way or the other.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like he just asks the question, what do we do with this generational trauma? How are we handling mental illness?
Yeah.
Really, what is mental illness? Like, because he asks that question really is too. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, are the
basically like
right?
Looney Lad is giving a speech to
Right.
a room full of mentally ill, like in his head, and he asked the question, like, what do we do with these people? How do we treat these people? Look at how we're treating them. I mean, he is asking those
Right.
questions that, again, we're asking still today. What, 25? How many years later?
30.
30. Fuck. I can't do math either. Like 35 years later. Right? And we're still sort of saying, well, how do we treat people with mental illness? How do we sort of talk about this? Right. Oh, wait, mental illness might be like genetic in some way. Yeah. I mean, he's putting these things out there in this film, and I haven't read the novel, so I don't know how much he did that. But this stuff is coming out in popular culture in films, and it's still not today.
Well, and we're also denying generational trauma today.
Right.
So, I mean, like, it's just, we're discounting it as we speak, essentially. So, I mean, not you and I are not discounting it, but I mean.
No, we're calling attention to it.
Right. I hope people find this podcast, specifically this episode, and I hope people go out and watch these films, and I hope they come and tell us about it, because I do think, I know that you can kind of scoff at the pretentiousness of like film nerds and buffs and whatever you want to call it, this elitism that exists or that can exist. I think these films, if you find yourself thinking that you're a movie lover, these are films that are important to seek out. They're important to be part of your repertoire, and they're important to be able to talk about. You don't see movies like this every single day. And I mean, and it's I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that other than just say, go and watch these movies, make them known, tell your friends about them, put them in the conversation, because that's how these become.
That's how room gets made for them.
Right.
Because there is no room being made for them now. Like you said, there is no Funeral Parade of Roses extended universe. You know what I mean?
Matsumoto CU, right?
Yeah, that's what the
MCU
MCU stands for.
The Matsumoto Cinematic Universe.
And like,
Let's make that happen.
Well, we
that's
should.
That's a T-shirt that needs to happen.
Oh my God, yes.
Get to work on that.
Can we just like put a picture of me with my eyes bleeding? Just like. But no, I know that it's all about money and stuff, but this is what we're missing, right? We're missing opportunities to talk about films like these, to see films like these, to sort of, be blown away and open up to different conversations with films like these.
Yeah, in a day and age where I think well, I mean, like if you want to look at box office, I know not everyone. I know there's lamentations about box office poor performance of these $300 million. Why are we making $300 million films post pandemic?
Right.
Like why didn't we think through this and pare it down? Like what about the new Indiana Jones has to be $300 million? I mean, if you do the math on what the first Indiana Jones cost versus, I mean, like I understand inflated egos and that type of thing, but outside of that, really and I don't know that's what Indiana. People are screaming that I don't know what the new Indiana Jones cost. I don't. But assuming
Phoebe Waller-Bridge is in it, so it can cost whatever the fuck it needs to cost.
Right. But if we are lamenting the fact that these IP heavy, high budget films are underperforming again, but again, the only reason that they're underperforming is because of what the theaters have lamented for the longest time. And I think we forget this argument because we want to wrap it up in some weird political horseshit these days of like woke broke nonsense, which again is bullshit.
Yes.
It's just it's bullshit. It's because no one gives a fuck, and no one can even really define what that is. Like,
That's
anyway,
correct.
and so the real reason that box office, and I'm going to tell you definitively why it's waning.
This is why people tune in.
Right, why it's waning is because they've reduced the fucking window.
Yeah.
And it's what theaters have been decrying forever, and they were always adamant about. Well, now, it's got to be 3 months. It's got to be at least this amount of time, because if we don't, then people will fucking wait. And that's exactly what's happening. People are going to wait 4 to 6 weeks. They won't give a shit because it costs a family of four $100 fucking to go to the movies, right? It's $15 a pop plus your popcorn and everything else. It's going to fucking cost you that amount of money. And so people will most likely wait. And so that's the only reason that it's and theaters and the studios weirdly got over, but they're losing money. And I don't know how the dollars work once it gets to streaming. I don't. So I'm not going to sit there and
I don't think anybody does, though.
Right.
I mean, seriously.
Truly, right.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to make the argument of like who's really suffering from a box office perspective.
Well,
And who's,
viewers are.
Sure. Right. No, I'm with you. But like theaters lost their leverage once COVID hit, and they had nothing, and they were about to go under, and now there's less screens. So, yeah, I mean, there's no going back unless theaters can put their foot down and say, look, you're not going to release these movies. But video on demand dollars go directly into studio pockets.
Right. But also, go back to this idea of how much it costs to go to the theaters now. Look, there are no good guys in this in this argument. So on one hand, like, yeah, I would much rather go watch a film in the theater. But at the same time, can you blame? It's like going to a baseball game, right? One reason people don't go to baseball games anymore isn't because of the length of time, because it costs you $200 to go watch a fucking game,
right?
And
when owners are charging you $50 to park,
right? We went to the movies just yesterday, and I was watching a family of four buy. Everyone got a slushie,
right?
And there were multiple bags of popcorn and other treats, and I'm like, they just spent probably close to $200 with tickets for everybody and all that. I'm like, that.
So who can afford that? Right?
It should not cost that much, right? It should not cost us that much to engage in leisure time, right? It should not cost us that much to engage in any kind of artistic, it shouldn't cost us that much to engage with art,
right? And so to that end of these, all right. So if we can scale back the grandiosity of these budgets and these, and again, I'm not ever saying that people who work on these films shouldn't get paid. I get paid what they're worth. That's not what I'm saying. But there's obviously room for a $1 million film versus $300 million films that are clearly going to underperform, because again, we have seemingly hit an IP. Maybe we've always had IP, right? We've always had
sure
these types of proproperties, right? But again,
there's a saturation.
But you're going back to, like, if you look at Marvel, if you look at because Marvel and DC, you can always make an argument, but they're the same movies, right? Like, regardless of and you've oversaturated it to the point. Now you've got Star Wars. Now you've oversaturated it to the point because you've got streaming services that are also now putting out content.
You've got to do TV shows on top of.
And so, is it surprising that people aren't? I know that indie did fine, but is it surprising that someone is not? People aren't going to a movie that hasn't had a release in over 16 years.
Yeah,
and that is like, you already have 3 good movies, and one that, so if it gets like, is there that much excitement over another Indiana Jones film? Whereas you look at something like Spider-Man Across the Universe, which is at least interesting visually to watch. It's
innovative,
right? And it's bringing something different to the table. I don't know. I get my point being is that I think there's room, because you see these non-IP movies start to perform better than expected. Things like Asteroid City, and there's one other one that's, I guess, I don't know if Past Lives is or not, but there was another one that came out in the same that was overperforming of what its expectations were. there's an audience
Sanctuary,
that exists.
S&M cells.
Right. It was the re-release of Ennis Men that was really
That's what it was.
Our
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
kicked it over the next.
Oh, yeah.
600 theaters. Let's put it in.
We got it into one half of a screen.
And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what they. I don't. I mean, I think that this. What's going to be interesting, because what's going to happen soon is that we're going to start running up against, again, like we did with COVID. You're going to start running out of material because you're going to have writers and actors strike. I mean, the writer strike's going on for 3 months now. The actor strike is just about to kick off, July 12th. So all that's going to happen. You're going to start running out of material. Really, what happens then? I don't know. I think that there's an appetite for some of this, like some of these repertory films, and honestly, I don't necessarily. Were we not to get any more big budget, big ticket films, like if the expectation went back down to, and I know that this is not how capitalism works.
Yeah.
But if the expectation went back down to where we were on 1980s levels, where the top grossing film, maybe there was $200 million grossing films, and the rest of them were, if a film grossed $20 million, or that was considered a success if it only cost $3 or whatever.
Right. But that was back when films we made films for that amount of money.
I don't know. I find the whole. We had this conversation off mic about how we're in this weird age of art disappearing almost immediately. And so the story came out about Disney pulling off this movie that's McKenna Grace and Kid Cudi. It's called Crater. It's a sci-fi movie. It's got middling reviews on IMDb, so most likely it probably just sucks, right? It's just not. But I mean, like, when I say sucks, I don't, whatever. I'm not going to watch it. I mean, it's just not for me, so it's fine. I'm not going to go. But it's being pulled from Disney Plus after 7. So you figure that a sci-fi film probably costs $20-30 million. If it doesn't exist on, streaming anymore. I know it'll still exist in piracy. And we can talk to that point in just a second. But it'll never exist on a physical media release. I mean, weirdly enough, Barbarian doesn't exist.
I know it doesn't
on
have a physical
media release. And so we are seeing the wane and basically the death of any sort of I think true release. It's not a big, huge blockbuster or something that's not picked up by a niche market like Criterion or Vinegar or Arrow or Synapse or whatever. I mean, like there's obviously they're boutiques, but those guys are not really focusing on first release. Criterion is sort of kicking back into like
with
quicker releases, right? Yeah. But they'll pick up you'll see Oscar winners from the previous year start getting really early Criterion releases.
But now they have that deal, with it's Janus and who else? I can't remember the other distributor that they worked with that did EO and Godland, and so those will get like an immediate release after theater runs, right? So, but again, like those are, and I think in part those are kind of some of the films we're talking about. A film like EO, a film like Godland, right? Getting an immediate physical media release through Criterion, after the theater run that they've agreed on.
And I don't know what Barbarian made, but let's just say it's $50 million, right? Let's just say it was a decent horror release because
it surpassed what it was
what it
expected
cost,
to.
right. So I mean, it got good reviews. I mean, it had probably had decent legs. The fact that it doesn't have a blue, I think it's very telling. I'm not saying necessarily that it's worrisome, or I think it's telling that if these kind of mid-level movies that we're talking about that should be back into theaters are not even getting media releases, and I don't know where. I'm assuming that you can rent it, but for how long is the real question.
And if it's on a streaming service, say if it's on a Max or a Peacock or whatever, how long does it stay there, or does it get buried? And how do you account for revenue of that one film? Right. I mean, again, like no one knows, and I understand that, but you would think that the studio would be like, people will buy Blu-rays of this, right? I mean, enough people will. People are still.
Even if you did it as a
Skinamarink got a steelbook issue.
right. And I think maybe that was Shudder pushing it or something. I don't know, but
but still, I mean,
but still, your point's made. I mean, like even if it was a burn on demand service, and and again, maybe the economics of that doesn't make sense, but like it seems like you would sell some, right?
So can I want to ask you something,
Yeah.
and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think this is what we do.
Yeah.
So I think on one hand, you're making the case that the promise of streaming, the promise of sort of like storing things in the cloudish realm, right? Streaming music, streaming videos, that promise is a lie. And that it's not going to keep everything around forever, that it's doing the exact opposite. It's making it easier for things to disappear or get lost.
Right. I mean, I mean, I'm not making any sort of like grand
no,
but I mean, like and we're moving into this like historically anyway, right? Where we don't actually own anything anymore ever.
Right.
We're going to be able to rent the computer service that exists in our car and essentially everything, because that's the next step of capitalism, right? The only way that you can continually bring in money is to make sure that no one owns shit,
right?
And we're always paying for the service.
Right.
But putting a pin in that and like, saying we can't fight that doesn't really, I guess, what is our concern? I mean, because again, it doesn't like, I find it interesting that we're moving seemingly backwards from a stage where, you used to have to hunt down certain pieces of media to be able to consume them, whether they be Japanese horror or whether they be foreign films or what have you.
Or import records.
Right. I mean, obscure things. Right. And then we hit a portion of where everyone had access to essentially everything, even if it was through piracy, but it was also opening up to region-free players. The ability to buy globally on eBay or marketplaces that you could have shipped globally. It just seems interesting that we're not only not able to do that anymore, but that we're almost inviting a new era of lost media that's going to exist, and that we already have so much of it that doesn't exist anymore. And what does that say? Or what does it say that we're losing things that are almost immediately released, and we're losing them? And so, and what's the value on things that were released a year ago, or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago? I don't know. I guess it's just more of a conversation starter than more than anything else. Is like we're weirdly regressing. Whereas for the past 30 years, not 30 years, but the past, probably 15 to 20, we've been able to access really anything. And now, not that anybody's lamenting Crater on Disney Plus, but also we've seen movies that were finished that will never get released. And that's happened in the past. But it's weird that.
But I think the decisions are being made for different reasons now.
Sure.
Right? Where it is so much about bottom line, but only bottom line for kind of like the upper echelon. It's not even about, because the reason that Indiana Jones cost $300 million is because all of these like producers that want to get involved and sort of make money off of it, right? And if we make it bigger and whatever. But that same idea of, okay, now we're going to just like cut back and we're not going to do this because I need to still keep my bonus. And again, I know I'm kind of going back into this capitalism sucks thing, right? But this is part of it. And I think people do lament the loss of like a Crater, because now we're sort of just taking, whether it's good or bad art, it's still art, right? Now we're just taking this away from potential eyes, from potential engagements, from, I don't know, can you learn something from Crater? Maybe.
Right.
Probably not. I'm probably just being sentimental at the at the loss of anything. But this comes down to like attention span, where we're all just like, okay, that was yesterday, right? That was last week's new release. I don't care anymore.
And there is a glut of, a seeming glut of content, right?
Yes,
more than we can take in.
Yeah.
But that being said, as we get to a point of, I don't know, homeostasis of like just suck that exists with the output that, again, I don't want to be, of course, I don't want to get into the conversation about, I'm not the guy who says every major release is shit. That's not my point. But this idea that this used to happen a lot because we would kill things because a new version of that thing was coming out, right? So you'd never be able to see a 1930s version of a movie that's being remade because we didn't want you to compare it and we didn't want you to distract you from owning this thing. So I guess maybe the conversation is not really new. It's just a matter of is it compatible? And I don't know the answer to that question.
No, I don't think any of us do. Yeah, I don't know.
And I think the combat really is going to be pushing people back into piracy. And I don't necessarily know, like, the piracy is not from a common user perspective. I'm not sure if it's easy enough, or I think it's easy enough. I don't think people know how to do it.
Do you want to tell people how to download torrent downloaders?
No, but I mean, like, it was one thing when Napster was a simple thing, and it didn't really seem like there's a Mindy Kaling bit on the Comedy Bang Bang album, and she's like, they put out these warnings. She's like, you wouldn't steal a car, would you? And she's like, well, if I could steal a car and my friend would still have that exact same car, like, yeah, I might steal a car. And she's like, and he goes, if I didn't know anybody who'd ever bought a car before, yeah, I'd probably steal a car. It's a really funny bit. Comedy Bang Bang. Go listen to the album if you can find it. I don't even know if you can anymore.
Right,
but
download it from Napster.
So I don't necessarily know if the barrier to entry is so high because like for a while, like this kind of comes in waves, right? For a while, people were going to use groups after torrents got to be, and then VPNs became prolific. For a while, people were just sideloading their Apple TVs and Kodis, and they could just with whatever their streaming sticks with Kodis, and they could just search for things, and it was just more of a streaming thing. So there's always ways around it. I don't think that'll ever go away. But that being said, even then, piracy is not necessarily the complete answer to any of this. You still have to have people that host, right? I mean, so like, not everything is available. So I don't know. I think it's a problem, and I don't know if you don't have major studios putting out these works. I think there's money to be made. I think there's clearly money to be made. There's enough millennials and boomers that are reinvesting in physical media
because Gen X has always been here.
Right. So there's
our fault.
There's a nostalgia portion of it, and because people, when Snowmageddon comes and there's or when streaming services go off, whatever. There's always physical media.
When the internet crashes,
right? But yeah, I don't know. I find it kind of disturbing and saddening, and I do think that it's short-sighted. I do think that it's just, to me, it's just like the Napster situation, where Blockbuster sat up and ran up against not doing online rentals and screwing their customers over for so long. The music studios were trying to force you into buying songs for $1 rather than giving you everything like they have. I mean, like, and again, there was a happy medium. People wanted to pay.
Mm-hmm.
People wanted to, but they didn't. And again, it's more, but you can't make people pay $20 for non-physical media. And so there was a happy medium to be had. So things like if Spotify had jumped off right after, if they had gone in and rushed Spotify as soon as, or whatever, as soon as Napster kicked off, rather than lamenting what Napster was doing to them and trying to fight it, which you never were going to actually do, you could have made billions. I don't know if that is an exaggeration, but
you could have made money.
You could have made money, and so there's a service out there that exists, and maybe because people just don't give a shit because you flood them with crap, and as long as new crap comes along, I can continue to watch that crap. But you hear all the time people lamenting about, like, if you were to have, and this is happening with with Turner Classic Movies as well. You get where everything. And I know, again, everything is the bottom line. Everything is the dollar, and everything is about maximizing profits. But to a certain extent, you also, if you devalue the product that you're putting out there's an audience for Turner Classic Movies.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge audience for Turner Classic Movies. it's crazy to me that you seemingly cut off your nose to spite your face just because you're trying to make sure that your profits are maximized for.
That's how economics work.
No, it's not true. I mean, it's how bullshit capitalism works. But I know what
I'm kidding, but again, like I don't know why. It's this constant chase of profits. The profits can never be high enough. And look, I have no sympathy for these people because you
what? And that's the thing. I have no sympathy for the pirates. I mean, I have no sympathy when you get pirated. I really don't.
No, not at all.
If you gatekeep all of this to the extent, what choice?
Make it again, like make it affordable. Right, make it affordable. Right, make it affordable. I mean, there's a reason people go crate digging for records, right, and not buy new stuff because all of a sudden, right, when people are like, oh wait, vinyl records are cool again. All of these like major labels, now they're like $35 for a fucking record. Well, fuck you. I'm not going to pay that, right?
Right.
I mean, but it's that idea. Why do you have to charge so much? And again, I know it's profits. I know that's how capitalism works. But this is why these other things exist, right? This is why piracy exists. This is why people aren't going to the fucking theater.
Right.
It's why they're waiting to watch something at home and why they're waiting to then rent or stream for free.
Well, and it's like they don't. I mean, I get that the studios don't own the theaters anymore, but it's like
right.
But again, it's a fuck you. I'm going to take my ball and go home.
Yeah,
and we'll all fail rather than actually let's meet somewhere in the middle and make this palatable for everyone.
Right, because like you said, we will pay. Right, I'm more than happy to pay for things. I mean, it's fine. I don't believe money is a real thing anyway. And look, I'm never going to be able to stop working. So it doesn't really matter, right? I will pay for things. That's not what I'm saying. But when you try to gouge me for everything, right? When you're going to charge me $9 for a medium bag of popcorn on top of the $15 for a ticket.
Well, and if you start to devalue your own product, like you said, if you start to pull things, if I have to watch them in a certain window, this is not, this is not Disney putting shit back in the vault, right? This is not that.
Right.
This is I put out subpar product for whatever reason I'm pulling it off at 7. Why the fuck would why would I keep your service?
Right.
If you're going to cut shit off, what I'll do is I'll download the shit that I want to see and I just won't pay you.
Right.
Because you don't give a shit about me giving me access to what I want to get access to.
Well, they don't give a shit about you, period.
Right.
I mean, they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. Look, corporations are not people, and they don't care about people.
They do not.
Anyway,
hey.
Jason, next time on Why Does the Wilhelm Scream, what are we going to be doing?
We're going to dig into the first, let's say, 2 films of John Cassavetes.
All right, let's do it.
We're going to dig into Cassavetes as I'm excited about the process, and I'm excited about watching all these movies over again. But yeah, so if you want to watch along with us, the next time we watch, we'll watch those 2 first films.
Perfect. We're going to talk about anything else? We're going to talk about something new?
It'll be a minute before we record again, so I'm sure we'll throw something in new between now and then.
Yeah. You know us. We don't have a plan here. We're just making it up as we go along.
That's very true.
Which is the only way to do it. All right, next time we will dig into Cassavetes and we will do something else as well. Until then, thanks for listening, everyone.
And Sakabi Suzukare.
ゲイボーイをもすごくなんか綺麗に描いてくれるっていうことで撮りました。
どういう動機でね、ゲイボーイになったの？
やっぱり自分がこういうね、女の子になってみたいってやっぱり好きだから。
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason.
If you like today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time,